But I think you're still good. Yeah. This is more.
Hi, welcome this evening. We're so glad to have some of our students join us. If you guys want to get situated, and we have Belvedere South Middle School band students, so we appreciate you coming to perform and show your talent this evening with us.
Oh, okay. How did you guys do? Let's do wait for 1, 2, 3, One, two, ready, aim. Hello, everyone. First piece we got for you is Beauty and the Beast from Beauty and the Beast because that's this year's musical over itself. Ready? Tonight is for their upcoming concert on Thursday over at VHS, 7 o'clock. Check it out.
Thank you so much to our South Band students, along with Mrs. Morin, for their musical selections this evening. Thank you.
All right, it is now 6:12, and we are out of closed executive session, and we will reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Education with the pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brenner.
Here.
Mr. Bucher. Mr. Herrera.
Here.
Mrs. Howe.
Here.
Ms. Mayville.
Here.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Here.
Mr. Zickert.
Here.
Are there any items on the agenda any members of the board would like to amend or move? Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education on February 20th, 2024 as presented?
So moved. Second.
Member Hauk made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education on February 20th, 2024 as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Howe.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-0. At this time, we would like to recognize those in District 100 who have gone above and beyond. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Shub for our first recognition.
All right, our first recognition this night is for Christine Frank. I saw you out there. Come on up while we read a few words about you. Christine Frank, PE teacher at Washington, received the VFW Teacher of the Year Award on January 20th, 2024, and advanced to the District 6 level, where she also received the VFW Teacher of the Year Award. Some of the areas included in District 6 besides Belvedere are Rockford, Loves Park, Dixon, Freeport, Stockton, Savannah, Galena, Roscoe, Rochelle, Hanover, Rock Falls, Polo, Oregon, and South Beloit. Mrs. Frank is now waiting to hear if she will be advancing to the state level. Each year, Mrs. Frank goes above and beyond, putting on a Veterans Day assembly to teach the students about the armed forces, and it is a spectacular event. This is an all-day event to include miniature flags Mrs. Frank purchases on her own to place around the perimeter of her school building, along with repairing any flags that get damaged by the weather. In addition to donating flags to each student and staff member at her school. She also secures military vehicles for the students to learn about and sit in, and she organizes veterans reading in classrooms and having lunch with them to answer questions and share their stories and pictures. Afterwards, she puts on a school-wide assembly for local veterans and the students to participate in. The assembly includes posting the colors by the color guard, songs by the students, playing of the Armed Forces medley to recognize and honor the veterans in attendance from the different branches of the armed service, guest speakers, and students reciting what it means to be a veteran. And this is just at her school. Outside of the school, Mrs. Frank is just as involved in the community, supporting the VFW and veterans. We are so happy to have Christine Frank represent our school district as VFW Teacher of the Year. Is there anything you wanted to say? No pressure, no pressure.
You don't have to.
Stand up if you're a veteran or a soldier. You're my why. So, thank you.
Thank you. Such an excellent way to start the board meeting. Additionally, Marzano Resources High Reliability Schools Level 2 certification is to be presented this evening. District 100 was recognized by the Marzano Group for achieving High Reliability Schools Level 2 certification as a result of all district schools earning their Level 2 certification. HRS Level 2 focused on effective teaching in every classroom. At Level 2 of the High Reliability Schools Framework, educators learn how to develop and maintain effective instruction in every classroom by building a shared language of instruction and using this common language to raise the level of pedagogical skill both individually and collectively. The school district continues to support all schools as we work to learn their HRS Level 3 certification for a guaranteed and viable curriculum. We have this statue to present, and I would like to present this to Board President Brenner and to Dr. Carson, who was a very integral part of that work. So, all right, and now board shutouts.
Yep.
All right, go. All right. The following people have been nominated by their peers for going above and beyond in District 100. When I call your name, come on up and stay standing up here as we recognize everyone on our list this evening. Courtney Adkins. Courtney has been generous with her skills and knowledge to support teachers and students in District 100. She has a grace and style about her that empowers others to try new strategies and supports to meet the needs of our students. She has been called upon several times this year to support teams that are struggling to meet challenging needs of students in our classrooms. She is a VIP. Her passion, professionalism, and pride for the work she does needs to be celebrated. She is an excellent teacher, SLP, and coach. We are so fortunate to have her on our team. Congratulations. Katie Hornbeck. Katie has done an outstanding job in the first 5 months as our new leader at Perry Elementary School. She meets every challenge that is thrown at her with integrity. Having been a Perry student herself, she is empathetic to situations that are unique to Perry. But above all of that, she is a principal that is trusted by both the staff and our students. We are truly blessed to have her in our Perry family. In addition, Mrs. Hornbeck is continuing to provide balanced leadership to Perry's students and staff. Her kindness and attention to details is evident in the school culture and everyday operations of Perry. Her guidance is helping staff and students achieve their best across learning environments, submitted by Sue Thomas and Ryan Peterson. Ann Abraham. Ann stepped in and covered evaluations for our outplaced students at Seth Whitman. She not only did a fantastic job with the assessments, but she took the time to go out and spend time with the students and get to know them. I am extremely grateful to have Ann not only as a representative of special education, but of District 100 overall. She is a phenomenal asset to the district. Jody Ferris. Jody excels in her role as an essential elements teacher. Not everyone has the privilege to see the happenings on a day-to-day basis in her classroom, but those who do know that she goes above and beyond to make learning fun and engaging for the students in her classroom. From flying into space on rockets to her annual Fat Bear Week activities and polls, Jody makes her classroom a safe place for students who are eager to return each and every day. Jody always finds ways to celebrate student success and their individuality. Thank you, Jody. And Anita Koziel and Pam Schwendow, I think, also are not able to join us this evening. However, Anita and Pam were incredibly helpful to me while I was covering the nursing office at SMS. They were supportive and offered to help look up parent contact information in the printed binders, as this information was not accessible due to technical issues with the eSchool program. It was a busy day in the nurse's office, and their support made such a difference, allowing me to focus on providing the best care to our students. They were kind and had a positive attitude during this time. Thank you, Anita and Pam. Emily Owen. Emily, a teacher at BHS, was invited to speak this fall at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission FAFSA Symposium on both October 25th at Illinois Central College in East Peoria and again on November 7th at Moraine Valley Community College in Palos Hills. Since joining the district in 2020, Emily has taken on the cause of financial aid access for our students with enthusiasm and passion, and she has been recognized for her efforts by being invited to speak. I am incredibly proud of her and honored to work with her every day. Thank you, Emily. And Janine Hadley. I needed permissions added to be able to send out a Parent Square message. I contacted Janine at 4:05 p.m. on a Friday, hoping she would still be there, as I wanted the message to go out that weekend. She called me right away from her cell phone and to help solve the situation. She then called me from home to ensure that it worked and I was able to do what I wanted. It would have been easy for her to say, "I'm done for the day. It can wait until Monday." But she did not. She even went above and beyond by calling me from home to make sure the fix worked and I was able to do what I wanted. Thank you, Janine, for going the extra mile. Congratulations to all of our board shout-out recognitions.
All right, at this time, I'd like to open up the floor to our board members if there are any celebrations that they have heard or seen that they would like to share at this time since our last meeting.
Got one. Every time I think about what I'm going to say, there's a lot of different things, but I have now changed courses here because Christine Frank, I just wanted to add, I've been to a few of her assemblies. If you have not, as board members, go. They are amazing. The veterans that come, I mean, speaking with the kids, this is when you weren't me and Christine. I mean, just hearing those kids talk to those veterans, it's touching, it's amazing. And when she talks about vehicles, the one time she had a plane there, like I was like, what? So if you're able to go, Christine. I mean, what you do for this district, it's amazing. And congrats on your award. I think you're fabulous.
Thank you.
Any others?
Sure, I'll go next. February 7th, Read Aloud Day. So for the teachers, administrators, and staff that put that on, good job getting that put on. Thank you for inviting the board members to participate on that. We're grateful for that. And again, to the teachers and staff, if you have any other opportunities you'd like to invite the board members for us to come and read to your students, please feel free to let us know. Also wanted to give a shout out to, we had an opportunity as board members to attend a board evaluation training back on January 31st. Dr. Perry Hill from the Illinois Association of School Boards came out to conduct this training for us. I've been on the school board almost 5 years. I don't know everything. There's others that have been here for longer. But I think this was a great opportunity to learn new things. For us as board members, I came away with a lot of good ideas, new concepts that came out of that, and I was just grateful this was offered. this training was offered to us board members. So thank you very much for putting that on for us.
Any others?
I just wanted, I can't remember where I read it, but I wanted to thank everyone involved in bringing the substitute teachers back from Kelly to the district. Our sub rates have gone up, which is a great thing. There's still, we still have a ways to go to get them where we want them, but significant improvement in the first year. So I don't know who all is involved in that, but please pass on that that is really something to celebrate.
Thank you.
I would give a shout out to the special education teachers in the district, both at the elementary and secondary level. Specifically, tonight I'm going to mention the things that are happening at the secondary level, but there's a lot of things going on by teachers in the elementary buildings as well. But there's a great deal of community opportunity for these students to be out and about in the community and having real-world learning opportunities. As a parent of special needs children who are now no longer in the district, they're grown adults now, but the value that comes from these kids being able to go in and pay for their own meal at the window and learn to order for themselves and to buy the things they want or to buy classroom supplies, that is not without a great deal of effort and coordination, advocacy, I would say, as well, on the part of the teachers to keep those processes and programs available and to arrange everything from transportation to permission slips to money for kids when they don't have money because the field trips can get expensive, and to find ways to support financially when necessary. So it comes at a great deal of value and enrichment to students, and I would attest their parents and families as well. I appreciate the efforts that are being made. Again, I know it's happening at elementary. They're not quite introducing some of those things. They're not going out maybe and doing some of the same life skill kinds of things, but they are doing many things within buildings to be able to, students who are differently abled and affected by a challenge one or the other, it can take them significantly longer to be able to acquire and master those kinds of skills. So starting young and having that be something that goes throughout their education has been wonderful to see.
I'd like to celebrate, I know Holly and I were able to sit at the table for the past negotiations with our paras, and I'm really excited to see the work that some of our staff who are in this room are putting on for our paras, that they get to have a special time for the roles that they do to continue with training, that they're a part of our SIP day structures now. I feel really good that we're able to, not only when we bring on staff, but in anywhere they are in their career, give them professional opportunities. I think that was a really missed piece for a long time, and I'm really pleased to see that continuation. So that would be my celebration this month. All right. We also are excited to have this month some of our student council representatives back again to share what's going on in our schools. And so first up, we have our representative from Belvedere High School. Welcome. Dylan, you're able to come on up.
Hello. So from Washington Academy is thrilled to announce the remarkable growth our students have achieved in their winter math assessments. Their dedication and hard work have truly paid off, showcasing outstanding progress that we couldn't be prouder of. Additionally, we are delighted to share that our efforts in fostering a positive school environment have resulted in significant 22.6% decrease in major student incident referrals. This accomplishment reflects our commitment to creating a safe and supportive community for all. As we celebrate Black History Month, our students are not only commemorating the past, but also acknowledging and honoring individuals who contribute to inspire us today. Congratulations to all our students for their achievements and contributions. Meehan Elementary said, we are excited to highlight our students' hard work over the past few months. We saw an overall increase in our students in math growth and achievement scores. Additionally, our students have worked hard on their SLE goals and have many students cashing in for lunch with the teacher, basketball with the principal, window painting, puzzles, and other activities with our staff. Our efforts as a school to continue to build a positive school environment and focus on self-regulation has helped us to decrease our major incidents by 38% thus far. At the end of January, Meehan students and staff took part in Kindness Week, where students participated in various kinds of challenges and activities. Finally, our student council has been highlighting influential leaders and individuals for Black History Month on our morning announcement. We are so proud of our students and staff for all their accomplishments this winter. Keep up the great work, Mustangs. From Belvedere South Middle School. South Middle School has completed our winter map testing, exceeding our goals for students. NWEA reports that South students were in the 98th to 99th percentile according to the national norms in math growth, and between 70th and 90th percentile in ELA growth from the fall to winter testing sessions. Way to go, Bucks! Congratulations to our math counts team, who finished first this past weekend and is advancing downstate as a team, a first time for South Middle School. The South Middle School math counts team consists of Adam H., Pierce N., Andrew S., Brady B., Ben B., Piper N., Ethan Z., and Daniel O. The team is coached by Mrs. Canefield and Mr. Furr. Girls basketball and Scholastic are in full swing now, and wrestling just ended. A number of new clubs are also going to begin for students, including Drama Club, Girls on the Run, Art Club, and the Garden Club. Thank you for offering the many opportunities for students to stay involved this year using the after-school transportation. Go Bucks! From Belvedere High School. BHS has had an exciting start to second semester. Tom Farley from Rosecrans and founder of the Chris Farley Foundation came to BHS to talk to students about mental wellness and belonging through the art of improv and comedy. Scholastic are the Nick 10 Conference champions for the first time in nearly 30 years. This is the first time in 11 years that anyone other than Auburn has been a conference champ. Varsity girls basketball secured a winning record for this season for the first time in 10 years after defeating Freeport on February 8th, and after previously defeating Guilford for the first time in 8 years. Our celebrations for January and February include National Instructional Coaches Day, National Hall Monitors Day, a sunglasses giveaway for National Wear Red Day, National School Counseling Week, School Resource Officer Appreciation Day, and we will cap it off with Junior Class Appreciation Day on February 27th. From Everest High School. Everest High School Student Council applied for and received a grant from the Northern Illinois Community Foundation for $1,700. Their grant was a student-driven grant where students not only came up with the idea of what the grant was to be used for, but it also had been written by students as well as presented in person to the grant community. Everest will be bringing an engaging assembly called the NED Show to Meehan Elementary School in March. The NED Show uses an engaging assembly called the NED Show. The NED Show uses an engaging speaker and yo-yos to deliver a message to students to help kids recognize their personal strength and how family and school staff can be supported in your lives. SEL Learning in Standard 1B recognizes personal qualities and external supports. In addition to supporting Meehan, the grant has also included money for Everest Student Council to be trained as peer mentors through Adaptive Minds. Trained students will meet with select homeroom classes at South Middle School to promote the importance of mental health awareness and identifying ways to seek support if struggling with mental health. And that is all.
Thank you, Dylan. Next, we have Belvedere North High School. Rhea, if you want to come forward for your report.
Good evening, here's the report. So from Lincoln, they had Representative Dave Villa come and share a story about Abe Lincoln to their third graders. Second graders will have a music concert on February 26th, and they are gearing up for their annual Fine Arts Night on March 21st. Seth Whitman, Chef's Night Out at Maggio's Pizza, Family Roller Skating Night at Skateland, a building-wide popcorn celebration for great behavior, Seth Whitman Night at the Ice Hogs game where students sang the national anthem on the ice, Seth Whitman Ice Skating Night at Riverside Ice Arena, and Chef's Night Out at Jimmy John's. They also finished map testing and their students showed growth in the areas of ELA and math. From Caledonia. February has been a wonderful month so far at Caledonia. They celebrated World Read Aloud Day on February 2nd, and multiple members of the community came and read in classrooms. On February 9th, they had their Valentine's Day dance and had a wonderful turnout. They were able to get 24% of their parents to fill out the 5 essential surveys as well. Belvedere Central. At BCMS, students have been busy with MAP and access testing these last few weeks since they returned from break. On January 26th, the PBIS team hosted a rec night and karaoke where their students were able to play volleyball, dodgeball, and basketball. It was a great night for all. Student athletes are getting all of those canceled games and meets made up, and they're having fun. They're having a fun season for girls basketball, wrestling, and cheer. And next week, they'll be celebrating over 450 students making the honor roll for the first semester. From Perry. In January, Perry Ice Skating Night got moved to a rec night at River's Edge due to rain, and was still a great success. They had many families come out to climb the rock wall and play volleyball and basketball in the big gym. They are still waiting on an official total, but they had a successful Culver's Night Out on February 6th. The show of support from families was impressive, and they are so thankful. Students have been working hard on assessments. They wrapped up their winter math assessment with their 1st through 5th grade classes, increasing their median percentile for math achievement by 4 percentage points. From Belvedere North, we have had a great start to the 2nd semester. The cheer team finished 3rd in the state of Illinois. Science Olympiad has had a great start and won multiple tournaments. And we celebrated Mental Wellness Month and had our Best Buddies basketball game. And finally, our theater had their spring musical this past weekend called Lightning Thief. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time this evening. Of course, you're welcome to go. Thank you for coming to our meeting. All right, next on our agenda, we will have our annual financial audit presentation provided by Corey Cohen. It's for Georgians. While you're working on that, Janine, do you want us to do public comment while you're trying to get that virtually set up?
He's here now.
Oh, okay.
He just popped up. I didn't see anyone in the waiting room.
All right.
You should be able to hear you guys from your mics. Oh, there it is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Corey Cowan with Gordon Associates. We do the annual audit. So I wanted to give you a little recap, a little summary of how the year went financially. So I have a presentation that I'll be focused on here for this meeting. If there's any other questions, feel free to let me know and ask away as we go here. So to start, as we look at the total equity of the district, including fixed assets, about $280 million. When we look at the district as a whole, we like to really look at and focus in on the operating funds. So educational, O&M, transportation, working cash. So when we pull all the restricted funds out, or some of the other funds that are reserved for specific purposes, we get back to net equity of about $84.3 million. Last year was about 80.776, so we did have an increase in total equity in those funds. Revenues, actual revenues and expenditures, every fund was over revenues and expenditures, other than transportation. Now obviously transportation was an issue in districts across the state, just based on the timing of when the categoricals come in. Transportation ramped back up in FY23. That revenues will now come in FY24. So that's why we took such a hit there. And then financial profile score, 3.9. 4.0 would be a perfect score. The only hit on that would be the long-term debt amount outstanding. But 3.9, still financial recognition, the highest category that NCS has to offer. To get a little more into revenues and expenditures of the district, this was a year in FY23 where we saw more of obviously as a transition more back to local funding from federal funding. So as some of the pandemic-related items started to fall off from the federal government, we shifted back to more local fees, lunches, just student fees in general. So local revenues went up a pretty large amount. We also had a pretty high investment market with where interest rates were, so we saw our investment income also increase by about $800,000. And then replacement taxes, obviously overall, were up about $1 million as well from 22 to 23. So overall, those operating funds were up about $3.4 million, revenues over expenditures in FY23. And then as far as, when we look at your sources of revenues, so when we break down, kind of that local, state, federal funding, real estate taxes and evidence-based funding make up over 75% of all revenue sources of the district. Local source, state source there, your two main funding sources. And then from there, other local revenues, so again, kind of those local fees, investment earnings, replacement taxes would make up about 12%. And then federal sources now are down to 7% of total funding of the district. So main federal sources are going to be, lunch program, Title I, IDA. There's still plenty of ESSER money floating around as well. Those are going to be your main federal sources. Those revenues, real estate taxes have stayed relatively steady over the last few years. Evidence-based funding has increased over the last couple of years. And then obviously our local and federal split again, decreasing those federal funds, increasing, supplementing with more of those local funds now. And as far as expenditures go, the main source of our expenditure increase in FY23 was related to salaries and benefits, not out of the norm. That we see increases there. Everything else stayed relatively steady as far as purchase services go. The main increase in purchase services actually would have been related to transportation. Going up about 1.5 million from FY22 to 23 were the transportation costs. But overall, went from about 101 million of expenditures to 111 million in those operating funds. And then as far as the sources of expenditure goes, so 72% of all expenditures of the district are related to pay salaries and benefits. It's very common to see 65 to 75% of all expenditures at any given district be related to salaries and benefits. Personnel obviously is where the vast majority of where those costs are going to come from. And then purchase services, again, almost 19% of total expenditures of the district. But again, that would include a decent amount that would be the transportation, outsourcing transportation. And then as far as expenditures go, they're really, operating expenditures have remained relatively steady over the last few years. Again, salaries and benefits, having that annual increase, which we'd expect to see. Everything else stayed relatively steady over the last 5 years. And then when we look at just revenues and expenses as a whole between those four operating funds, we are at 115 million, 115.144 of revenues, 111.718 million of expenditures. So that was that $3.4 million surplus we had in those operating funds, which for the last 2 years we've been, for the last 3 years we've been at a surplus, but you can see we kind of have a nice little gap there the last couple of years. So another surplus year in 23. And then operating fund balances, you can see kind of where we've come up from, $46 million in 2014 up to, we're up to $84 million right now at the end of FY23. As we look at when we look at the fund balances of the operating funds and ISB as well, a lot of times the main focus is how much cash and investments are on hand, how much assets are on hand going forward into the next year to cover expenditures. So overall, the district is up to 9 months on hand in those operating funds. So now that does include advanced taxes. However, there are taxes received right at the end of June that are really meant for the next fiscal year. But 9 months on hand, 6 months on hand is really what ISB's looking for as far as that perfect profile score. So 9 months on hand is a good fund balance to have. And then one more thing here is just on the assessed valuations and the tax rates. Now, you know, being subject to VTEL, kind of limited here, but it is always nice to see the valuation continue to increase, you know, up to 1.054 billion on that last levy. So, you know, as long as that assessed valuation is increasing, that tax rate should stay relatively steady with a little bit of a decline as long as that EAB increases enough each year. So that's what I have for the presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
Knowing you don't have a crystal ball, but just knowing you probably get in tune with the rest of the state. I know Pritzker's coming out with his budget proposal tomorrow, in theory, or in his speech. Are most of the districts looking to stay even or to go up a little in evidence-based funding or overall state support, or don't you have any notion on that yet?
Well, I think overall, you know, I think as a whole, with where where we were with interest rates, where we were with funding, where we were with federal funds the last few years, I think districts across the state at this point are starting to pull back a little bit on some of these projections, right? Some of these surpluses they've had, some of these budgeted surpluses they've had. You know, knowing that, you know, some of these revenues will be dropping. I mean, replacement tax, you know, we've already seen is going to drop, you know, up to 25%, you know, going forward here. So, yeah, I think overall, you know, I think as we look at this going into probably more FY25, we would certainly look for some of these revenue categoricals to start decreasing.
One last quick question. We have a pretty sizable budget surplus, but one of the knocks we take is long-term debt. And I'm guessing that's from those bond refinances from some of the schools we build and stuff like that. Is there ever any advantage to paying off those bonds early, or is that just a dumb move?
No, I mean, I would, you know, no, I mean, I would probably, I would let those ride out. I mean, if some are callable, maybe you could look at some of those, especially, you know, I'd have to look at some of your rates, but you know, some are still stuck at higher rates. Yeah, I would probably let that money, you know, kind of work and invest before paying those off.
Any other questions? All right, well, we thank you for your time today and for joining us virtually.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right. At this time, members of the public or employees of District 100 may make public comments. As a reminder, any person appearing before the board is expected to address the board only at the appropriate time and follow the directives of the board president to maintain order and decorum. Identify oneself, limit comments to 3 minutes, and conduct oneself with respect and civility towards others, and otherwise abide by board policy 8:30, visitors to and conduct on school property. Do we have anyone wishing to address the board at this time? All right. Being none, we will transition on to our committee reports for the evening. We will now have our committee report, starting with Business Services, which was held on February 6th. Mr. Herrera, do you have anything you'd like to add or highlight regarding business service minutes?
Sure. Regarding business services, we will be looking at Sunday use, be voting on that later on, and roll call. Just a summary of business services, we will be, as a committee, looking at a more comprehensive plan for Sunday use. That should be done and completed by June, if you will. But we do have BYB's tryouts that we're going to be approving, or looking to approve tonight, as well as there's a church request as well. So that'll be coming up in roll call.
Is there any discussion during the meeting on, I know you had BYB on the thing because you mentioned that, but I think I saw that anyway. We got correspondence from that for the tryouts. Is there any reason we couldn't get a long-term plan before now? I mean, I think that having a long-term prognosis is a great thing, but these are all the same things we've been doing for years, I think, or a lot of them are. What is there any notion of why we're doing it now and didn't do it before?
I don't know that answer.
I'm just curious. Okay.
But I think this gives us an opportunity to have all the stakeholders that need to be involved with this, kind of develop this plan going forward.
Okay.
But the history, not quite sure.
Well, and I think there was discussion at the committee meeting as well, that in fact the use has significantly expanded and increased in the past few years, because before it was just one organization, now it's multiple organizations, and went from, I think they walked through year by year, like 9 requests for Sundays to now this request, which was 40 plus Sundays. So it has expanded year upon year upon year, and that was part of that conversation.
And, I mean, we had quite an in-depth conversation, and I do again want to thank the custodial teams, the community members that all came out and contributed, and the board members that came to that meeting as well, to kind of listen. And I think what we ultimately came up with is not wanting to rush into this decision, knowing that we had to have a plan and a recommendation coming forward, is looking at what we could do right now. And really, March is really the last month of the summer cold or winter cold, get them in. There was the concession to take out the options of all the practices and just keep those tryouts that were there. So that was the recommendation of the board. The committee, but taking the time, and we have had a lot of volunteers come in that want to be part of that action planning, and really looking at our policy and our facility use as a whole. What do we want to say charges? What is a feeder program? Really diving into it. I can't speak to what was here before I got here. But we also did display the new FMX system that now creates a calendar that shows all the events that are coming up at one time, and how the community will be able to start requesting those online so that we can see the whole process. So that's all part of redeveloping this plan and process of how we're going to do facility use. And it isn't just a Sunday issue, it's going to be for any use of our facilities.
But for the Sunday one, we've agonized over for a couple months at least. Do we have a significant more number this year than last year requests?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And involved union representation. They spoke last month about, the hardship that it was presenting, and we made the decision to allow it for February, and then we take the discussion up for March. Where did they land on thoughts about the recommendation presented tonight?
We had about 8 of the union representatives there at the meeting, and they felt that they were being heard. I mean, they, of course, know that they can't make these decisions right away to just shift, but they did feel that their concerns were being heard. They really appreciated being able to come and speak to the committee and weigh in their thoughts. So we got a much broader representation at the committee meeting, and it was, from individuals who don't typically come to our meetings and have their voice heard. So I was very appreciative that they did show up and do that, and I think that they were okay with the solution that was being recommended.
So they're I mean, because I really felt bad last month for them. I mean, I voted for it because I think it was the right thing to do, for the kids especially, but I also felt bad for them too, knowing that I thought felt like they were in an awkward position, but at least for another month, they're on board with
Right.
okay.
And I think they're taking, whether it's solace or understanding that we are coming up with a plan. That we're not gonna be in this position next winter when there's not gonna be that expectation that we're going to have 17 straight consecutive use of our facilities by both schools, that we're going to come in a plan, and they're gonna participate in that process if they want to, so.
Yeah, and I think they were appreciative of the feedback they were able to provide for us to take, again, to use towards the more comprehensive plan, give them a voice at the table, if you will, to share some of that feedback.
And maybe we're not that far yet. Did you guys kind of determine when we would revisit it for the further plan, or that wasn't?
We will be bringing that, right now we're setting up the meetings and getting the volunteers for the action plan. My off the cuff was that I told the committee that Sean and his team will be able to present that by the end of June. So I would
way
say
before
that
it's
we would
concerning.
hopefully, if we
Yeah.
don't have it for June business services, it would be presented the July business services to come to the board, so that we have plenty of timing to let those community know. But we also did get, some of the BYB representatives that were there offered to participate in that action planning. And so we are kind of opening it up to ask people to come in, and not just looking at BYB, but looking at the Bandits for wrestling, looking at Powers, all of those entities that may want to use our facilities, and coming up with that real comprehensive plan.
Anyone have further questions for Mr. Herrera or Mrs. Armstrong? Okay, next is educational services. That took place on February 7th. Mrs. Hauk, do you have anything that you would like to add or highlight to share about educational services minutes?
So just the post-ESSER budget recommendations, I know we're voting on that later. I just wanted to say that Dr. Shug and Wendy Taylor walked us through the process, how that worked, different, why decisions were made, and it was a lot of good information, and I think the committee felt good about the decisions that were there. But it was good because Wendy really spoke in detail about why we needed, to keep some of these things. So it was really good information there. So that's all I wanted to say on that. Everything else, good.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Hauk or Dr. Johnson or Dr. Carson? Okay. Next is parent-teacher advisory, was also held February 7th. Mrs. Whitcomb, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or share regarding parent-teacher advisory?
I just think it was good discussion. There was lots of input on a number of subjects, and more work for a number of areas to still be done, but I think it was, nothing to specifically highlight beyond what's included.
Anybody have any questions for Mrs. Whitcomb? All right, last up is our Policy and Personnel Committee report, which took place February 8th. Mr. Zickert, do you have anything you'd like to add or highlight from the meeting for Policy and Personnel?
No, I think some of them will come up. I think look at the strategic plan update and look at a couple of the job description changes and stuff. I think outside of that, it wasn't maybe as a media meeting as it normally has in the past.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Zickert or Dr. Shug? All right. Next on our agenda are consent agenda items. Are there any items on the consent agenda any members of the board would like to take out for separate consideration? All right. Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items numbers 2 through 15 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the consent agenda items number 2 through 15 as presented. Any discussion? I would also at this time like to acknowledge the following donations. We had underwear and sweatpants from Belvedere Women's Club, Donna Brookbank for Lincoln, Meehan, Perry Elementary Schools, and Washington Academy. We had a $100 donation from Reverend David Sheridan for Belvedere North High School Band. And we had $500 from Belvedere Auto Clinic, $200 from Matthew and Ashley Hain, and $100 from Frank Skirkins, Points and Greeny Lawyers, and $500 from Ben Kohlermeyer for Belvedere North High School Bass Fishing. Let's give a round of applause for those kind donations. And our roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 6-0. Next on the agenda are roll call agenda items. First on the agenda, we have expulsion of student 022024-1. Do I have a motion?
No.
Sorry, we
What
didn't
are we
have
doing?
that tonight. Disregard, my apologies. Okay, revisions to the existing Board of Education Policy 2:270, administering medicines to students. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the revisions to existing Board of Education Policy 2:270, administering medicines to students as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the revisions to existing Board of Education Policy 2:270, administering medicines to students as presented. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-0. Next on the agenda, we have adoption of meeting norms and board protocols. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the adoption of meeting norms and board protocols as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Who was it, Pam?
Mrs. Hauk.
Okay. Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the adoption of meeting norms and board protocols as presented. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just have a very quick one on this one. Part of it was, I mean, I was not there when we did this. I had indicated a month before that I was going to go on, I didn't say I was going on vacation, that's what I did. So I wasn't there. I'm not sure, in openness and honesty, I'm not sure I'd have gone anyway, because I had said that. I might have, but I might not have. So I at least want to be honest about it. I did get the impression that I was going to be able to provide input on this after the fact, but that never happened. I did get an email or a text that said, would you be interested in meeting with the board president and the superintendent and vice president to talk about input on that? And I said, yeah, anytime, although I knew we couldn't all do it because it was going to violate Open Meetings Act.
Yeah.
So even though I would have enjoyed that, I knew that wasn't going to happen. But then I never heard anything on that, which is, that's fine. I don't disagree with any of those. I think most of the time they're all followed anyway. My only problem is that I look at something I used to tell teachers all the time, for years, is don't make rules you're not going to enforce all the time because you're going to lose credibility.
Yep.
And that's the only reason I'm going to vote no on this. It has nothing to do with, I hope I've abided by them for 2 years or a little more than 2 years. If I haven't, then I openly asked to call me out on it. But I think to approve something that we all should have been doing anyway, that honestly we've never had the desire to enforce it in the past, and quite frankly, even if we wanted to, I'm not sure there's really any enforceability to it anyway. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it, doesn't mean we shouldn't be behaving like that, but that's my rationale. That's it.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I can't speak to when you guys were on the board before my time in relation to this work, but really this was like I had said, one of the sessions that I went to, Dr. Hill was one of the presenters when I went to ISB downtown. And really this was a piece that they're really trying to get a lot of different boards in sync with as far as continuing their practices. Some of the things you guys already started at one of the other self-evaluation meetings is A, having norms, and B, as you were alluding to, that yes, we're adhering to those. And in addition to that, they had some really great ideas that I really liked as far as similar to like Cassandra does in relation to the strategic plan and goal setting would be some avenues for us to even set some goals as a board that are things that we want to work on, whether it's, our professional development or involvement in committees or involvement with student stakeholder groups, or, like one idea that I really liked that also got brought up was about kind of bringing back some further student involvement at the board table in addition to what we have in our presentation. So really, to me, it's a continuation of some of the work we've already started and next steps and a growth area. And I think anytime we can learn from some of those best practices, I think those are good things that we should be doing, because we really set the tone for what our community looks at and how we act in public, so.
And I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, I think that the outreach we do, whether it be listening to teachers, listening to parents, listening to stakeholders, is all something we ought to strive to do even more of. I mean, not that we don't do it, but I think we ought to make a conscious effort to
Agreed.
even be more inclusive, not less inclusive.
Agreed.
So I guess that wasn't, I can't disagree with any of that. So, like I said, I gave my rationale for why, and I think that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I wasn't there. So I sent a commitment to very similar things prior to, back in November, I think, when, after the board retreat, and, said I have to examine and evaluate myself and whether or not I am adhering to what existed before or didn't. But I guess my question would be, hoping that these would be, again, without reservation or hesitation, I would say, valid and reasonable. But I'm missing a companion that says, if they're not, what then?
Right, yep, so that'd be like the next step. So if we decided after we initiate this is step one that Dr. Hill talked about. And so really step one is, how does this become a part of our meeting structure? Is this a part of our agenda? Is this a part that I would read as we initiate our meetings, starting to have these, and we work towards those? And then, that would be another following piece where a lot of boards have then determined, then yes, if we're not adhering to those, what are our follow-up protocols in relation to that? So that would be something we would have to further develop if that was the determination of the board.
For me, it would feel like that would be a single occurrence. Like we would, okay, here's, again, just my assessment of it, in my opinion. I would be more inclined to vote yes once that work was completed, because you're saying, okay, this is a start, and then there's a companion piece to go with it, and I feel like those are pretty hand in glove from my perspective.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think I would even lean toward even considering that if we actually had something that we actually could and would enforce. I mean, you have to be able to, there's a two-part to it.
Yep.
One, can you actually do anything? And I think the answer is honestly no. And two, if you can do anything, would you do anything? And that's the second part, so. That's it.
It was a great retreat. It was one of the best I think I've been to, so I wish everyone could have been there.
We do really like that presenter. I thought he was
Great.
more effective than maybe some we've had previously. I think he has a good pulse on, he deals with like a variety of different districts, some much larger districts than us that, too, what you guys brought up, have had, again, like I said, their protocols in place, and then the other piece as far as, okay, what's happening when we're not adhering to those norms? Because like Mr. Zickert said, you don't just want to have them and then nothing is to come of that, but once you set the culture where we have these expectations, then yes, what are we doing when we're not interacting in such a fashion, and what would that look like? But I do think it was.
And there were some ideas that were shared throughout that board training in terms of what then, the companion piece that Mrs. Whitcomb was asking about, that was discussed in that. I mean, obviously, we didn't have time to get through it all.
No,
we ran out
that
of
was a
time
part of
on
it,
that
too.
piece.
Mhm.
But this is step one, and then we'll be further education for ourselves and board evaluation to develop some of these next steps as well.
Because they even kind of, to both of your questions too, talked about another step even before you maybe have like your follow-up protocols for when people don't adhere. Another thing that they talked about was even doing a closed session where not just a board evaluation, but like after an actual board meeting, we have these norms, we're using them. Now, how do we assess all of our adherence towards those norms is another structure that they can provide as far as follow-up and support. So, that would be another option too. So I think we just keep the dialogue open with Dr. Shug to determine which or any of those we'd like to see happen to continue what is a multi-step process, because there's no way in that time we could get through all of it, obviously.
I like Perry. I heard him for 4 hours at the ISB, or the conference in November on, that was the one I went to on superintendent evaluations. So, I like him.
like
He's
him.
good. I agree. I had nothing against the person at all.
So, any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No.
Mr. Zickert.
No.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 4-2. I'm doing these separately, correct?
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion and a second to approve the BYB Sunday facility use for tryouts on 3/3/24 and 3/10/24 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion, and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the BYB Sunday facility use for tryouts on 3/3/24 and 3/10/24 as presented. Any discussion?
Yes, I believe are we missing the First United Methodist?
I have it
Church?
as two separate
Oh, are they? Okay,
items.
sorry. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Good.
I want to thank our staff, our facility staff, who were willing to come forward and talk to the board about this. I know that's not always an easy thing for staff to do. We individually get emails from staff sometimes, and individually, we have staff that talk to us about things, but we act as a board. So it is really important that when staff has concerns, that they talk to the board about it if it's something that falls within our purview. And again, I know that's not an easy thing, and sometimes that can happen through union leadership if individual staff members aren't comfortable, coming and talking to the board. But that was, I think sometimes the word brave is overblown, but it does take some courage to address some difficult topics and to come speak to the board as a whole so that we're all getting the same information. So I really want to commend our staff for that. It sounds like we've arrived at a sort of good solution that will get us through this year, and I look forward to see what we come up with going forward.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm fine with it, especially since the custodial staff's fine with it. I just hope that we come up with a comprehensive plan after that to move forward, which it seems like we are.
Anything else? Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-0. Additional Sunday facility usage. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the First United Methodist Church of Belvedere Sunday facility use of the PAC on 3/31/24 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the First United Methodist Church of Belvedere Sunday facility use of the PAC on 3/31/24 as presented. Any discussion?
And maybe I'm missing this. Are we charging for this one, or this is we're just letting them use it?
No, they pay to
They're
use
paying,
it.
okay. So they went through the process just like everybody else?
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
They actually did this request prior to, it was in September, but our PAC manager went out on maternity leave and it didn't get submitted in time.
Okay.
No, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
Mrs. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
And Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-0. Next on the agenda, push coin renewal. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the push coin renewal for 3 years as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the push coin renewal for 3 years as presented. Any discussion?
Yeah, only because I forgot this a little in policy, and I may have brought this up anyway, is this to me would have been an excellent place to have started on the executive summary form of doing this, because this is a pretty, from what I can tell, a pretty simplistic one. So you like to start with the easy ones and work your way up to the harder ones. I think the fact that they're doing it is fine, and I'm not going to vote no against the renewal. I just think that when we have the summary, and it just seemed odd to me, and maybe I took it the wrong way, so if I did, you can straighten me out, is that when we said the other ones decided not to bid because they couldn't beat the other price anyway, we typically, I mean, is that typical to happen like that? I mean, do they know what we're paying for? Do we tell them we're using Pushcoin, or I thought maybe we just solicit other people to do this and we see what they gave us.
Yep. It is, most of the agencies, Vanco and Student Cafe, they are looking at what you're using currently. And so it's very, on our website, it's, if you reach out, they will ask you, what are you using, or they'll go find it, and they know they can't beat it, and so they'll just say they declined a bid, which is why I'm now doing more formal bids, and I'm asking them to fill out the declination of bid.
Yeah.
And so that we can actually get them to sign off that they are declining the
Yeah, I think
bid.
it protects us too,
Yeah.
so that there's never a question about,
Yeah.
I never said that, or
Yeah.
I didn't, yeah.
And this what doesn't exceed the bidding threshold, which
Right.
would have, been another reason it didn't go out to bid for itself. It was just kind of a public solicitation of saying, hey, dude, can you give us some bids on what you'd like? But it doesn't meet the $35,000 threshold per year that would require us to bid. But I am trying to do the due diligence of getting out there. Some people just won't bid when you don't have to.
And I think with respect to how we want these to appear on the agenda, that should be something that comes up, perhaps that should be an agenda item for the board as a whole to provide input to the administration if the board wants to see a change in how these things are presented. So.
Didn't you guys decide that we would look?
We talked about that at policy. I think the problem was twofold. One, I mean, honestly, it was twofold. One, Sarah wasn't there, which that's not a bad. I'm not.
I was at conferences.
She was at parent-teacher conferences, but one of the things she wanted on there was to do it for HR contracts too.
Like
there
when you
wasn't, and I
hire
didn't have any
people.
context to explain that part
sorry,
to
yeah.
people, which is fine. I'm not. Nobody was complaining, but I mean, I couldn't relay what I think she wanted, and I didn't want to speak for her without having a clue what she wanted. The other part is, I don't think on the policy committee, because there isn't anybody on the policy committee that really has to vote on this stuff, that they really have much they might have much skin in the game, one way or the other, and how these are presented, because at the end of the day, it doesn't mean a whole lot to them. It doesn't, when we look at educational contracts, or we look at a lot of other stuff that we vote on, that really doesn't, I don't think they have a big concern about that, because it doesn't have any immediacy to them.
So you're suggesting we just bring it back for discussion with all of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think it's something that
I
we
think
need a
that's
formal
fine.
policy for necessarily. but-
Kind of like we did with the board agenda template, and then we all get on the same page in relation to that expectation.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, I just tried to explain to them. I thought it would make it easier for people to vote, having that information. That's why it was more important. I thought it would be more important to board members than it would be to stakeholders in general.
Okay. Any further discussion in relation to Pushcoin renewal? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk. Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 6-0. That one's sad. E-school services renewal. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the renewal of our e-school products, including custom elementary report cards and registration module through June 30, 2025, in the amount of $292,758.86 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the renewal of our e-school products, including custom elementary report cards and registration module through June 30, 2025, in the amount of $292,758.86 as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Are we happy with e-school? I mean, I don't know we've had e-school a long time. I mean, when I came here in 2008, we had e-school then, and probably even way before that. I know there's other platforms out there. Is this something we've always been happy with, or whether we are or not, it's better than what else is out there?
So what I'll say, Mr. Zickert, is that Tyler is working on putting together a plan to do a formal review and evaluation of our student information system.
Okay.
That he'll be putting together with a long-term tech plan. So I think it depends who you talk to and what kind of day they had with eSchool that day. There's certainly things that are challenging with it, but it's also the system that we're used to. But we do plan on going through a formal review process to evaluate that more formally.
Yeah, I mean, I've used eSchool a long time, and I mean, I've had as everybody I'm sure has, had their great moments with it and their not so great moments with it.
Yeah.
Had their glitches now and then, and other times it runs like a machine. I just didn't know, you hear some of the other ones out there like Skyward or some of the other ones. I have no clue if they're any good or not. I was just curious how we compared to, if we're that happy with it that we didn't want to look anywhere else anyway. So that was my only question.
But it sounds like we wouldn't be completely blown away by the fact that they could bring something different next year, because they're going to be taking a comprehensive review and evaluation of all of it. They could bring this back again as being the clear winner and front runner. We could hear something else.
That's correct.
Before.
Yes.
I will say one thing though, for somebody who's done education a long time, is that the next one would have to be a clear winner, because even though people may not always like eSchool, it's the devil they know.
Right.
And when you switch systems like that, there's always a learning curve, as we found out with some other stuff. So, I mean, I think that's why I think you maybe have to be careful. Not where you're not going to do it, but just it'd have to be a clear winner, in my opinion.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk. Aye. Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-0. Post-ESSER 3 budget recommendations. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the committee's recommendations regarding reductions and modifications to the post-ESSER 3 budget?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the committee's recommendations regarding reductions and modifications to the post-ESSER 3 budget. Discussion?
I thought that I had read that we were going to discuss it tonight, so I apologize that I thought we were going to have to take a deeper dive, and maybe there would be committee members who are here that were part of the process. There are some things on here I don't love, or that I understand we're choosing difficult things regardless of which direction we go. I wonder if there's any opportunity for there to be a greater level of discussion or a revisiting of this in a month when we can have some of the committee members who were, I don't know if they were called a committee, but the team of people who were involved to come and give a little bit more detail. And I know we've gotten some cursory high notes about, these are kind of the discussions, but about the why some of these things were chosen over others. I mean, if not, I understand we'll vote tonight, and I'll vote no, because I can't vote for the reduction of programming that's student-facing, i.e. tutoring and tutoring transportation and, bilingual liaison and those sorts of things, in deference to keeping some of the other things that are recommended to be kept. But, so I guess I would just say, is there any interest or possibility that could occur? So otherwise I understand we're going to vote, and based on what I know, will.
Do we have some committee members here tonight?
We do. Mr. Zickert was on the committee, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Ady, myself, Ms. Armstrong, and I see Ms. Taylor there as well, who is a part of the committee. So we definitely do have some representatives here tonight. I know we did go to Business Services and Ed Services, and Ms. Taylor was there with me to present and answer questions that came up, as well as other committee members who were there during those presentations to those two committees. So we did take some time to do that. We did talk about, Mr. Fry is here too, and he was also on the committee. We did talk about the fact that this, as it was originally structured, could come to the board in February or could come to the board in March, depending on how the committees felt and what sort of feedback they wanted. The ESSER committee that talked about this was prepared to make these recommendations, and if we had feedback from Ed Services or Business Services that there was significant changes that needed to be made, we were prepared to reconvene that team and make some modifications, but both committees felt like they wanted to forward it to the board level, which is why it is coming here tonight. But certainly if there are questions, I think committee members would be happy to talk about what transpired at the committee and why the decisions were made, in addition to the rationale that's presented here in this document.
Well, I sat at the committees. I missed one meeting, so I made it every one except one. I think that when I was asked at the last meeting, at the end of it, whether I thought, there was a lot of discussion before anybody asked me anything on what was the immediacy of this. Somebody else brought it up, it wasn't me. I can't remember who did, but somebody else did. On what was the immediacy of doing this, when we have to decide this by, when was the board going to make a decision, so on and so forth. So the discussion got to be that, well, and I think I answered the question. I told them, I said, well, I don't think these are all reoccurring contracts. This isn't like the teachers, when we decide to do reductions in force and stuff like that, where there's any hard deadline. These people were all on what I would call one-year contracts anyway. So they were renewable, but they didn't have to. I mean, there wasn't any deadline when to renew them or not renew them. So, I mean, we could do something in April, we could do something in May. Those dates were just all floated out then at the time. At the very end, it got to be the question of, okay, Mr. Zickert, what do you think the board feels on this? Or how do you think the board would feel on this? I don't want to speak for the board. I mean, I was there as a board member, but I don't want to speak for any of the rest of you 6 or 5 now today, with it, because I didn't have a clue how you feel about it, not feel about it, and I certainly didn't want to be presumptuous. So I said, I thought, because there was so much meat to it, and there was so much discussion, and I'm not saying there wasn't always consensus, but there was a lot of things that people valued a lot more than other things, that based on what they were, depending on what group you were, which is fine. I mean, I think that's very typical. So I said, well, I think it's a good thing for the board to start discussing it in February. So when I thought that's honestly, quite candidly, what was going to happen. So then, when I saw it was on for potential vote, I contacted Dr. Shug and told her I was kind of disappointed in that, because that wasn't the impression I wanted to give or thought I did give at that time, that this was ready for a vote and so on and so forth. And she told me she would discuss it with the board president and board vice president. And she very nicely called me back a day later, 2 days later, 1 or 2 days later, and told me she did, that they were going to move ahead with it anyway because of that. So I thought, well, maybe I misinterpreted something, maybe I messed up, because I'm getting old now. It happens. But on the board update we got on the 16th under Goal 5, when you look at the board update we got Friday, when it has post-ESSER, it has board discussion at February meeting. It doesn't say anything about a vote. It said discussion. When I asked Cassandra about that, or Miss Dr. Shug about it, I apologize. When I asked Dr. Shug about that, she said, well, when it went to business services and it went to ed, they decided, go ahead and move it forward anyway. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, that was the decision that was made. I don't think, and I could be wrong, because I was one of 14 or 13 or 15, depending on what day it was, at the meeting there. I'm not sure anybody, when we left that meeting, before this one, thought there was going to be a vote in February by the board. I don't think anybody really thought that, because there were some items in there that had changed during even that meeting based on who was talking and who wanted what. Because I just give you a couple quick examples. If you ask the school nurses, they're all going to want to keep the nurses. That makes sense. I mean, that makes total sense. But if you ask some of the other people that are going to lose something because of that, would they be in favor of that? You may get a different answer. And I think that was some of the discussion that had gone on at the meetings. It depended on how it affected you, what answer. I mean, I brought up the fact that if you're a third grade teacher that has 30 kids packed in your classroom and some of them are difficult, and you had a choice between that or choice between having a reduced class size, how would you vote? And I think they typically vote. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I think it just depends on who you ask sometime and what answer you get. And there was a lot of discussion at that last meeting about some of the stuff that got more support than others. And I think that's my only problem with doing it like this, is that I think this stuff is really, really important. I mean, I think this stuff really affects us educationally big time. And I think it has to align up with, and I brought this up before to Dr. Shug, is it has to line up with what we're going to do to the I don't know how to speak, I apologize. I think it needs to line up on how we view the strategic plan. I think it needs to be weighed against some of the other stuff we are going to do, because when we add or cut stuff, it affects something else. It has a domino effect. That if we cut, if we add something, or we decide we want to do a 12-month school nurse instead of a 9, or we decide we want to do something else, that means we're not doing something else. It got to be an either or kind of thing at these meetings. That if you take this, you're going to lose this kind of thing. And I think that's where you have to really make some priority decisions in what you want to keep and what you don't. And I do agree with Mrs. Whitcomb on this, is that I'm not saying some of the other stuff doesn't have value, because it does. I told Dr. Shug before, when I went into the ESSER meeting, if you'd asked me about the health coordinator, I was a hard no. When I went before, just from what I thought I knew before. After sitting through those meetings, I wasn't anywhere near quite as hard on that and I've told her that more than once. But now, if I have to weigh that versus cutting tutoring for kids and transportation and stuff like that, it doesn't mean I'm against it. It just means I value one a little more than the other. So I think that's where we have some really difficult decisions to make here, that I'm nervous that I sat through 6 of these meetings, and so did Dr. Johnson, and so did Mr. Fry and other people, that we struggle with this over 6 meetings, not 10 minutes. That's just my opinion.
So do you think this needs to go back to that committee?
I think here's what I think, honestly. I think what would be helpful is that the board weighed in on what their outlook is on this, and then go back to the committee and let them tweak what they want to do based on what the board. I think the committee would appreciate board feedback on how they view some of this. For example, I'll just give you a quick example. One of the things on the committee is, I think we ended up with a 1.9 deficit, or 1.8, am I correct on that?
It's now 1.9, yep.
Yeah, 1.9 deficit. There's no assertion from the committee that the board would be okay with that. I mean, that we even would be okay with going $2 million in debt based on, and that's leaving it the way it is now. So I think how they value stuff or don't value stuff may be determined, like, if we said, we're not going to go in there, we're not going to deficit spend at all, that may change how they view some of this stuff. Or do you want to get rid of stuff that is student-facing or direct with student correlation, have priority over something else? I think they would be interested to know that.
Well, I think the time for that to happen would have been, all along as the committee was meeting. Like, the committee's given their recommendation, and for us to, you can do what you want, but like, for us to go to the committee now and say, we don't want to deficit spend, well, that would have been good information for the committee to know up front before they wasted their time over all these meetings.
I'm sorry.
So I think that is probably, that would have been helpful. those parameters should have probably been given to the committee up front if we are going to undo this. I mean, that would basically undo all the work of the committee, which is problematic in itself. I had no
The parameters of this, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the parameters on this when I was on the committee is this was supposed to be treated like a teacher contract negotiation. That this was hush-hush, there was what stays in this room doesn't leave this room, you can't talk about it with anybody, you can't discuss it with anybody.
Right,
which I
we can still
honor.
give parameters.
But I don't think, honestly, and I'm just being very candid about this because I don't mind making decisions, but I really don't think it was for me to give input for the rest of you 5 or 6 in how you view this and what your thoughts are on this. I don't think it was appropriate because I didn't have a clue.
Right, and that's why, like in union negotiations, like you said, the board meets in closed and says, hey, here's kind of our ceiling, here's what we're feeling, like gives the parameters up front.
Right, absolutely.
So that probably would have been a good thing for the board to do instead of now, I guess, redoing the committee's work. Like, I
don't think there's anything to, I'm sorry.
Well, if we say we don't want to deficit spend, here you go, committee. Work with that parameter. This is just.
I think a lot of this stuff, and maybe I'm wrong, so the other committee member, including Dr. Shuggan and Dr. Johnson could chime in too, is that some of this stuff a lot of times didn't even have majority approval, but it got put down. Like, one of them got changed at the last meeting from a proposal on part of it to all of it. So, this stuff was fluid even up until the last time, and I think people, I don't want to say didn't dig in, but I don't think there was any expectation that this was going to pass tonight. I don't.
So you think there was an expectation that this would go back to that committee?
I don't think the committee, maybe I'm wrong on this, and tell me if I am. I'm not sure the committee thought they were totally done with this.
Ms. Taylor's waving her hand out there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
Just as someone who is at every meeting, not just the committee meetings for ESSER, but also when we presented it to business services and when we presented it to ed services, right?
Right. Yep.
When we discussed the deficit spending at that last ESSER meeting, I think we were already discussing that when you came into the meeting. We brought that to business services. And when we talked about it in business services, we talked about how we have had a surplus in budgets for the last few years, and there was a very real possibility that could happen again, and that we didn't want to make cuts before we knew there was going to be a deficit. We could make cuts in our budget after the fact. But it wasn't that, we had already cut from 3.7 down to 1.9 and felt that that was an appropriate number to bring to the committee. I don't know how it could have been anything but deficit spending, since this was all spending from money we didn't have, and if we kept any of it, that's what it would have to be, is deficit spending. As far as some of the logic of some of the things, I can guarantee you that students were the very first thing in our minds of how we made the decisions, and when we talk about like tutoring being cut and everything, elementary level tutoring that isn't being used a whole lot was the thing that we cut. High school tutoring, middle school tutoring, all stays. The health coordinator thing we spoke about many times, and the only extra conversation we had at the very last meeting was confirming that we all thought it should stay at the higher level versus cutting it down, because we thought that was an important role, an important position. And I also think that we thought any conversation that the board would need to have is what would happen now. So if individual things needed to be changed, you could amend the motion as needed. But I feel like in the ESSER committee, I feel like the majority of us were all on the same page that it was going to these other two committees to determine if it should be voted on. And then after going to business services and then going into ed services, we did decide that it should be voted on now because some of the things in this affect people's jobs. That's why we said we didn't want to talk about it in advance. It was merely because we didn't want people to panic if we were talking about cutting their jobs or not cutting their jobs. That's why we had the secrecy, and that's also the same reason why we thought it needed to be voted on sooner rather than later. I think that's everything that was
And I hate to, I mean, I've agreed so much with Mrs. Taylor in the last few months. I hate to start a bad trend because we've been agreeing a lot lately. But I do think, honestly, that when I was asked whether this should go to the board in February or not, if I would have said no, we wouldn't even be talking about it today. And I thought it was just going to go for discussion, not for any more than that. Now, whatever transpired after that, I can't speak to, but when I left that meeting and I stayed to the end, that's what I thought was going to happen. And I expressed that a week ago, but like I said before, if we want to vote on it, we can vote on it. I mean, that's how democracy works, so.
I have two things. Mrs. Armstrong, are you able to articulate as far as like, I think a lot of these things are super important, obviously. Like what is the game plan in relation to, because obviously the numeric still is fairly high, right? That we're taking on additional like spending, right? So what is the plan as far as trying to pay that now that we won't have the ESSER funds?
Well, my plan is always going to be to try to present you a balanced budget. I did present you a balanced budget this year. I went ahead and ran some of the numbers going back all the way to the 1920 school year. Every school year since the 1920 school year, and when we're talking about operating funds, which is your Fund 10, 20, 40, and 50. So that's your Social Security, Medicare, Transportation, O&M, and Ed Fund. We have projected deficit budgets every year except this year. In none of those years have we ever experienced a deficit actual expense. We have added to fund balance, in most cases, excess of $1 million, some up to last year, which was $10 million. I think that through careful budgeting, really looking at what we're doing, I don't want to tell you 100% I will come with you with a balanced budget. My intent is always to come with that balanced budget, but I do think that there are areas that we have conservatively budgeted and that we have over-predicted some of our expenses. As I'm beginning to work with our building principals, we've started our budget reviews, we're looking at what next year's are. We are looking at those situations. I don't feel comfortable saying, yep, we're going to make unilateral 5 or 10% reductions because we've been experiencing this. I can't speak to how budgets were developed prior to me being here, but I can speak to how I managed the first budget that I got here in the 4.5 months that I was here in the fiscal year, and how I'm managing the budgets this year. I do think there's flexibility in the budget. I 100% do not want to create an illusion that I'm just going to come up with $1.9 million. There is that possibility. We have a lot of things going on, so I think there needs to be awareness in there, but I think there also has to be that understanding that we have not experienced what we have anticipated. So although it is not uncommon that this board has approved deficit budgets, as your CFO, that will never be my intent to present you with that. But I think there has to be clear understanding that as we're talking right now, if we were to do this and to manage our budgets exactly as we did, keeping everything status quo, there would be the potential of a deficit budget coming to the board. by getting this approved and knowing that direction and knowing the parameters in which I have to build a budget, this gives me that lens to start that work sooner and be able to do that. By no means am I saying you have to make a decision tonight. That is ultimately your decision. But being able to see the trajectory of where we want to be, that's going to allow me to have more time to have these conversations with the board, with our administration, and decide what path we want to go to ensure that hopefully I do present you with that balanced budget come the end of June, getting that preliminary budget to you. But we have not experienced that deficit budget as of yet.
Well, the last, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I had a question for Dr. Shuck. So, you were on the committee. Were there conversations at the committee about, and I'm sure there were, about big picture, about how these choices align to our goals and our strategic plan?
That was the first part of what we decided how we would prioritize the spending, was looking directly at how they aligned with the strategic plan. So that was definitely a driving force in those conversations. And as Mrs. Taylor spoke to, where we did make reductions or modifications, we considered what had been effective and what had been less effective. So we considered the stakeholder feedback, which we got on a broad scale as well as a narrower scale in terms of actual focus groups. So we looked at what people had prioritized as well as what the data supported and how that aligned with the strategic plan goals. So that definitely was, a driving factor in terms of all of these discussions. And those reductions that you're seeing in terms of after-school tutoring and summer school were to keep the most important parts of those that we heard from our stakeholder groups. And as we have gotten feedback after we shared this information, we have tried to also incorporate that feedback through business services and ed services in terms of what you see here. Where we maybe got it wrong, which was really the middle school content leaders, that we got a lot of feedback that this really was aligned to the strategic plan, and we needed to figure out how we could support that with our current budget dollars.
I think in the last 10 years, if you look at the last 10 years, we didn't get that big surplus because we deficit spent it any year. We've had 2 years out of the last 10, we've even been close to deficit spending. We've been $500,000 plus. Both of them, some of them we've been as high as 10. A lot of them we've been 7. Last year we were 3.5 million. Traditionally, we ended up with more money than we do. And I know, I'm bringing up a sore subject because I know how a couple people felt about it, is that when we decided to close Kish, we were supposed to have a big deficit and we ended up with a big surplus. So, and to save $500,000 back then, that's what we saved, $550,000 back then.
A year.
And we ended up with a sizable surplus that year. And every year after that, way more than $550,000. But we did anyway. I think that when we look at this, do I think we'll actually deficit spend? No. Even if we didn't cut any of this, I don't think we did. We could add some of that stuff back on. I don't think we deficit spend anyway. But that's not what we're being asked to do. What we're being asked to do is prioritize things. For instance, I know, at least from a few years ago, that when they were going to cut transportation for after-school tutoring for the middle schools, Belvedere South wasn't very happy because they knew that affected them way more than Central, because those kids need the transportation more than the other one does. So that's going to have a really detrimental, in fact, at least 4 years ago when I talked about it with them, that was going to have a very detrimental effect on the number of kids that they would be able to do anything with after school. So I think when we look at things that face kids, that are kid-facing type things, whether it be transportation, whether it be summer school, whether it be after-school tutoring, or whatever, and then we get onto the topic of what was thought upon at the strategic plan to be the number one priority was student achievement, somehow that doesn't mesh too well with what we thought was our number one goal. At least the people on the strategic plan said was their number one goal at the time to there. we can make all this stuff match up. I could take any one of these and make it part of the strategic plan. It's not that hard. I'm not saying they're not valuable either. I think it's a choosing what's more valuable than something else is the choice. Not that they're not all valuable, just some have to have a greater weight than others. That's just my opinion.
Right. Was this, it sounds, I mean, I'm kind of hearing two different things, that the committee basically had a decent consensus around these, but you don't feel that way. I'm trying to remain ends focused here. You know, we say the what, and the committees and staff come up with the how. And if we have given the committees the proper direction, and the how fits in with the what, I'm not inclined to, there's not much point in the committee if we're not going to give them the parameters and figure out the how. Were there people on the committee that felt like that this end result did not fit with the strategic plan or the priorities of the board?
I think they looked at the strategic plan, and I'm, by the way, was the one that brought up during this committee, we need to go by the strategic plan. So that came from me and the committee to start with.
Good job.
I know, thank you. Not often I get that, but thank you. I didn't mean to, I don't get that from anybody very often. But so I appreciate that, I really do. I do think, though, that just as an example, things like, I think if you, at the very beginning of the committee meeting, the health coordinator, 9 months, I think most people were all for that were there. I think that was pretty, and then it got changed to 12, which is fine. I mean, because I think there was a push from a few people that they made a passionate argument why it should be 12 instead of 9, to save, I don't know, it was like $30,000 or change or something like that. I think, though, that when you look at the committee is a resource, and this is just my opinion. The committee is a resource for the board. There isn't anybody on the committee that got to vote for anything in terms of the budget, the overall picture of the board, and stuff like that. I think we ask them for advice and what their opinion is, and then we have to make an educated decision based on what we think is looked at as the overall picture of the strategic plan, what our goals are, so on and so forth. And we need to make an educated decision. And I think if there are people that believe, and I'm not saying they're wrong or right, I'm just making the example, if there are some people that think things that directly affect kids aren't as important as things that don't, that's their opinion. It doesn't mean they're wrong, it's just their opinion. And I think that's where I think, in my opinion, we need to look at, because when we look at IER scores or SAT scores, and we're going to get to that in a little while, and we look at the number one goal of student achievement, taking things away from that directly affect kids like tutoring and after-school transportation and stuff like that is very possibly going to have a negative impact on that. That's just my opinion.
It sounded like the committee looked at the effectiveness of some of these tools and tried to prioritize the more effective expenditures of the money.
And also the input that we had received from the various stakeholder groups on the impactfulness of this. To be clear, the committee would be happy to keep all of the things. I mean, I think there was value in all of the things, and if we felt, however, we were charged with evaluating what it was most important and what we were going to recommend moving forward. I shared with you, that we received feedback on middle school content leaders. Now, in the past week or so, we've received some additional feedback on transportation for tutoring and how impactful would that be. This proposal is to say we are willing to, support these pieces that are recommended by the committee. It doesn't necessarily mean we wouldn't look at some of these other pieces and evaluate it year upon year upon year in terms of what do we need to bring back or not bring back. or modify further as time goes on. I mean, I think that was definitely the thinking. I would also say the signing bonuses was one of those pieces. We looked at complete elimination of the signing bonuses. We don't know exactly what the impact of that is going to be. If it winds up creating a real deficit for us in terms of our ability to recruit new staff, we said we are going to revisit that and see what we need to do. We talked about modifications of that. You know, do we look at market in a more refined way than we have in the past? Do we keep some of them? Do we not? And again, the decision at the end of the day was, this is an item that's not student-facing, this is an item that's a big cost, and we are going to eliminate it at this point, and then come back and revisit it. I think after-school tutoring transportation is another item that might need to be looked at even sooner than that. So that was, as the feedback sort of comes down, that's the other one I've received feedback on, that we could certainly take an additional look at, but we wanted to, I think our hope is to hear from the board, would you support these items moving forward? And certainly we can take that back to the committee as well. That would really be a board level decision.
I just think too, in the big picture, like tomorrow night, there's going to be a meeting for the Long Range Facilities and Planning Committee, which I know they have some items that, you know, in the future, that near future or not so near future, they may add considerable cost to the district too. We have requests for adding hours to positions and things like that. They're going to add cost to the district on top of that 1.9 million. So I think this all, and that's not the committee's fault for not knowing any of that or having to be any part of that, because that wasn't their job, nor should it be. But it's our job to have to look at that all in the big picture and say whatever we do here actually has an effect on that too. Because it's not like it's just isolated all by itself, that it's not going to affect some of this other stuff. It may affect some of this other stuff. And I think that's why we need to look at a big picture too, based on things like that, along with the recommendations we got from the committee.
So I think more than one thing can be true at the same time, right? I think we can all agree that the possibility exists for that to be true. I believe that it is true that the committee spent valuable, invested time to wrestle with these things. I believe that they made hard decisions and would have preferred to be able to put forward, keep it all. I also believe it's possible to want a different outcome or want different things to be kept than others, and vote, as I would tonight, as we're going to vote, no, and that isn't a signal that the value of the committee wasn't good, or that they weren't seeking to do their due diligence and that they weren't trying hard. I think they brought a recommendation, and I won't get it right exactly how you said it, but they brought a recommendation, and while I could in large part agree, there are things I cannot, and I was not aware, and I wasn't aware that there was any sentiment that we could potentially cherry pick and say, let's take this back out and let's put that over there. And nor am I advocating that we do that. But I'm saying there was some discussion earlier in this item in discussion that, you know, we would be negating all of the work of the committee, or not negating, but we would be kind of saying your work was for nothing if we sent it back to them. I think it might also be able to be said if we were to start cherry picking things and saying, you know, but Ms. Taylor said, well, you know, we thought we were putting it forward with the recommendation that the board could amend some things and take some out and put some things in. And so for that reason, I appreciate the openness of the idea that a committee would be open to saying, you know, maybe you make some modifications and amend a little. That could also include the possibility of saying, let's hear some individual board feedback or some collective feedback and send it back to the committee for further discussion. If that's not what's decided tonight, then I think we're probably at the point of, you know, making a decision and voting. And I just want to preserve the notion that voting no does not negate the work of the committee. It doesn't indicate that they didn't try their best and come to what they believed was a solid recommendation. It also doesn't mean that someone who differs with that recommendation or values certain things differently from a number of perspectives, is against that committee or is seeking to be in any way, arbitrary and, contentious. So I would just like us to hold on to the idea that these things can be true at the same time. The value and work of the committee is appreciated, even by people who, persons in my case, would vote no as it stands.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to chime in. Tonight I came here prepared, understanding that there's two committees that brought this forward, to be placed in roll call. I've got some questions, I've had some concerns, I've reached out to get some answers. For example, Ms. Whitcomb shared the same concerns in terms of bilingual liaison. Well, I've since found out that, and it's in the Ed Services minutes as well, that that's going to be reviewed when they do a bilingual review of the services, right? In addition, that position fortunately hasn't been filled. So, but again, it's going to be covered in the review of the bilingual programs here. But again, I view this as an opportunity to ask questions and perhaps amend if we needed to amend. But I also came here understanding that I may not agree with all of this, but I do agree with the majority, and I have to live with that. These are tough decisions we're going to have to make, and that's what we're here to do, to make those decisions. So yes, I can support this. There are some things I'm not too pleased about, but I think the committee did a lot of work behind this. I think the additional committees, the Ed Services, Business Services reviewed this as well, brought it forth. And we're not going to get, it's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but we need to make the hard decisions, and that's what we were placed here to do. I'm prepared to vote on this. I'm prepared to support this. Could it be better? Yes. But could I live with it? Yes.
I will say, from the person who actually sat on the committee, I had no idea that we'd be voting on this tonight. Dr. Shug will tell you I was very surprised when I contacted her and told her that I'm really surprised that we're actually doing this. And then I got, well, we could piecemeal some of it maybe. I mean, we could look at just the interventionists, which I know is the biggest mark on there. It's $1 million something. That we could approve this, but we don't have to do anything else, and so on and so forth. And I was of the opinion at that time that once it got that far, it had been decided. And I haven't seen anything today that would change my mind on that. So, and if that's the way it is, that's fine. I mean, like I said, I'm all for democracy, that we could save ourselves a lot of discussion time if we just assert this is what we're going to do and do it, and we're done with it.
Well, and I think at the committee, a lot of the things that were brought up here tonight, we talked about. I mean, it's not like this was just an easy decision coming out of at least the committee I sat on. There were good discussions. There was a lot of people at the table. And, I had questions about a lot of it too. But, I mean, it's now went through 3 different committees. I think that this gives a lot of our staff a peace of mind that they're going to still have a job in a couple months. And like Joanne said, I mean, now this gives her extra time to be able to figure some things out. It's not perfect, Mr. Herrera, I agree with you. But I did learn at committee, as you know, that some of these positions weren't filled, and that's the reason, and they would be looked at. So a lot of my questions were answered. I think 2 things can be true at the same time. I think that I am going to respect the work of the 3 committees. I'm not saying you don't, Ms. Whitcomb, that's not what I'm saying. But I think that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to respect the work of those 3 committees, and I'm going to vote yes tonight.
I will say, as we move forward, that this would have been helpful is 2 years, or at least a year ago, and 2 years, I think 2 years ago, I brought up that this ESSER funding was going to end. And I brought up that as we go along, we should be evaluating the quality of these programs as we go along to decide what we're going to keep and what we're going to get rid of, because we may want to keep some stuff that we didn't have before, and we may value that more highly than stuff we already had. If we'd have seen something like this, even when we started the committee, I think that would have been very helpful. But I never saw that. So.
I have a question still in relation to interventionists, either for Dr. Ady or Dr. Shove, maybe. Would there, I know we've had a lot of dialogue in our meetings in relation to student needs and social emotional needs and student discipline needs. Would there be capabilities in relation to the intervention line item that we could potentially use some of that funding, that not just strictly academic interventionists, that there could be a capability, since those are annual postings, that some could potentially be restructured for a behavior type lens? Because I feel like that continues to be a dialogue that we're having, and I strictly believe we still need academic, but like, if some of those could maybe be looked at different, I feel like that would be a benefit.
So annually, we look at all of our MTSS numbers on the academic as well as the behavior, social, emotional sides. We're actually starting a look at some of those numbers tomorrow in cabinet and what that looks like and whether those things would be
So that in potential could be like a shifting of funds if we determine appropriate, or how we utilize the title allocation, right?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here is not through title. Like this group for this intervention line item is not our title funded interventionists.
Okay.
But in general, that's what we're starting to look at tomorrow,
Okay.
is
Okay.
what those numbers look like.
Okay.
And I think there was definitely conversation on the committee about evaluating all of these pieces moving forward, especially in light of the work that's happening on our ELA team and on our math team. How do we want to align the support to all of these services? We thought reducing the interventionists was so contradictory to what we were laying out in terms of the strategic plan. It just didn't seem like a recommendation that we could move forward to the board. But there was a lot of conversation about looking at how we're utilizing those resources and might utilize them differently in the future. Proficiency counselors the same. So I think that definitely there's room for all of those conversations moving forward, especially as we evaluate each position as we post moving forward, which we're trying to do systemically.
I think it just, I still think it's a big picture thing though, is it, and I'm glad you guys brought that up, is you even look at ESS at Central, which we haven't even done yet. I mean, that's gonna be a $200,000 a year thing that we may wanna keep or may not want to. We'll never know until it actually starts. But we may think that's more valuable to expand to other places. And I mean, we're talking 200,000 for one and who knows how much for others, that stuff all weighed in the light of now, if we truly believe it, we're gonna have a $2 million deficit. And how do we move forward with that, knowing that, all right, we're already 1.9 million in the hole, but we value that 200 grand there and we think somebody else needs it. Is that more valuable than something? I mean, those are all the pieces we have to look at. And I don't think I'm not sure we have.
And we will have to continue to evaluate. I mean, I think every year, that's what the strategic plan is about, is continuing to evaluate the effectiveness of our resources. I think your point is really sound, Matt. I mean, there's a lot of need, and we have to figure out how we're best prioritizing the spend to support that need.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
Mr. Booker. Mr. Zickert.
Excuse me, no.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No.
Mrs. Brunner.
Aye. Motion passed, 4-3. High school ESL credit. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the change to the high school course catalog in order to provide ESL 2, 3, and 4 with the elective English credit effective immediately as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the change to the high school course catalog in order to provide ESL 2, 3, and 4 with elective English credit effective immediately as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
And Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. The next agenda item is the transportation contract, a one-year extension. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the transportation contract renewal for the 2024-25 school year as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the transportation contract renewal for 2024-25 school year as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, not that I think we ought to get rid of first student, but we are getting resolved because of that. I mean, I was really disappointed on that cold day or that day we called it at the last minute. I mean, that was a pretty not good situation. So, and I'm not against extending their contract, but I just want to know do we ever get any kind of positive response out of that, that we still think they're the good company to be with?
It was unsafe to be on the roads.
Yeah, we continue to work through them. They have addressed some of their, I don't know, let's see, their challenges that occurred that day. They're working through it. By state statute now, we will have to go to bid next year. So you can't be under a contract with a transportation company for more than 10 years under the new transportation statute. So at this point, just knowing where we are and at this time of year, the recommendation is to renew for the year so that we can do an adequate bid because we will be mandated to go to bid next year. So, but we are addressing the ongoing concerns with route communications and some of the difficulties we've been experiencing this year. With the change of management with our site, we have identified some obstacles to overcome, and they're working through those.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Abstain.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
And Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 6 and 1 abstained. Treasurer's bond limit reduction. Do I have a motion and a second to reduce the bond limit from 25% to 10% as allowable by Illinois School Code 5-8-2 as presented?
So moved.
So good.
Member Herrera made a motion, Member Mayville seconded the motion to reduce the bond limit from 25% to 10% as allowable by Illinois School Code 5-8-2 as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
And Mrs. Brenner.
Aye, motion passed, 7-0. Health insurance plan year alignment. Do I have a motion and a second to approve? Do I have a motion and a second to realign the health plan renewal dates to September 1st as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion, and was it Booker or Herrera?
I heard Mr. Booker.
Okay. And Mr. Booker seconded the motion to realign the health plan renewal dates to September 1st as presented. Any discussion?
I will just say what I have said many years. I see the value in aligning the dates, and so I will be voting yes. But I also think that it is appropriate for us to take a deep dive into evaluating the process for effectiveness of and we need to take it to bid, or we need to validate why we're not. Why we just year over year over year over year stay where we are. And again, it's fine if we end up staying there, or that there's valid information that says, here's why we're not taking it to bid. But it is just something I would reiterate.
I was gonna say, to that point, I mean, I think that's why we're doing this, right?
Well, I want to clarify that last year we did bid all our health insurance and dental and stop loss and all that. The insurance that I think that you're referring to is our quick insurance, which are our property
Yes,
liability and all that.
yes.
So
I'm just-
this is solely our self-funded
Okay.
health insurance, which we rebid all of that last year.
Got it. Okay, so my mistake. I'll bring it up the next time we have that discussion.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye, motion passed, 7-0. The following items have been added for discussion or will be coming up for further review and or possible action in the future. Background information has been provided, and the board may ask questions and or request clarification at this time. First, for board discussion, we have e-learning. Again, for some context, the board originally discussed an e-learning plan in August of this school year, and given the 4 emergency days we have currently had this year, the board is revisiting this discussion again. The original plans and proposals were considered by the board and have been attached to board docs for your consideration.
I know we received some communications from parents asking why the board did not approve e-learning days when we voted on it. I think this year is an example of a year where it would have been good if we would have had the option to have e-learning days. And I also think we need to think about the situation where we were close to not having school at Central Middle School for a day because of sort of a natural disaster that happened in that school. You know, if our facilities team was not able to rectify that situation, the rest of the district would have had school that day, and those kiddos would have had zero learning that day. They just wouldn't have had it. It wouldn't have been made up. They wouldn't have had instruction. So I do think it's good to talk about this again. Wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion about what the board approved or didn't approve. I mean, there are no, the board said, no, we don't want to do e-learning days, and I think it's worth having the conversation again now with the benefit of hindsight.
I guess as far as the ROE goes, a few questions I have is I've heard mixed messaging in relation to food service. Is that something we would have to provide? We don't have to provide?
We did clarify that at the beginning of this process. Apparently there had initially been some information out there that food service needed to be provided. That is not in fact the case, so if we do have an e-learning day due to weather or whatever the case may be, the district is not obligated to provide food service on that day.
And then additionally, if we wanted to re-engage a conversation in relation to this, is it even allowable at this time with the ROE, or what, are we past a deadline and would we have to reinitiate for next year's dialogue, or?
I believe we need to reinitiate for next year. They asked to have the e-learning plan on file as of September 1st, which is why we came over the summer with this. I mean, that doesn't, of course, if the board could approve something any month in between that, but we would need to have it on file by September 1st in order to utilize it for the following school year.
I think it's worth the board members who voted against e-learning to think about if there were any suggestions they have that might allow them to vote in favor of an e-learning plan to give the administration that option. You know, the day where the weather got really bad around, 4:30, 5 a.m., that's kind of obviously not a good e-learning day because it was sort of an unanticipated day off, but the days where we know it's going to be super cold, those might be, I think it's a good thing for, I think it's a good option to have, and I think it's a very good option to have in the case where you might have a disaster at one of the high schools or one of the middle schools where that building alone cannot, for facility reasons, and that might occur, frankly, even not in the winter, but those kids are bringing their laptops home every night anyway. You don't have that as a consideration as much. So I think, this winter kind of brought forth some scenarios that perhaps people didn't think about, and if people can come up with some ways they might be able to get on board with an e-learning plan, a lot of districts do it and appear to do it just fine.
I think for me, I'm a big believer that in-school instruction is far better than e-learning, but that being said, I think we as a school district have bragged about being the first one to be one-to-one in the area. The fact that we're not doing e-learning says a lot about a lot of things. I think part of the reason was, when we talked the last time, was when the decision had to be made, what the expectations for some of the teachers were, what they weren't for others. There was a variety of issues involved there that even the union at that time had to sort through, because I think their opinion changed a little based on when they got feedback from their stakeholders, as they should have. I talked to teachers last year when we had all those e-learning, we had all those days we had to make up at the end of the year, that said, even though they didn't think e-learning was by far the best learning environment, it wasn't any worse than what was going on with those makeup days in June, the second week of June, anyway. And I would find it really hard for me personally, I'm just speaking for myself, not to vote for e-learning again, because I think I look at all the other districts that do it, and I'm thinking they have less resources than we do. How do they do it? I mean, I know we don't want to necessarily send stuff home with the kids, especially little kids, but we got districts that don't have anywhere near the resources we do, and they do it. I mean, they must come back or something, so I think on days when, and I know it was, if I was sitting in Dr. Shug's shoes, which I did many years ago, partly at least, is that if you got to call school at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon to tell them you need to take your e-learning stuff home, that's hard.
Yes,
I mean, that's a really, really tough thing to do. It's hard enough to do it at 4 in the morning, even at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But I think for us to tell them to take it home just in case isn't a bad thing. And if a few of them don't bring it back, you know what, then that happens. Stuff happens like that all the time. For us not to do it just because of stuff like that, I think it's wrong. I think as long as we can find an equitable thing, that the expectations for teachers are the same across the board, I don't know why we don't do it.
So it sounds like Mr. Zickert's changed his mind on it, so I think it is something that should come back.
Yeah, I would be open
action.
for it to come back.
Yeah, I would have voted for it the last time. I just didn't like the fact of what some of the expectations were different among teachers. That was the only reason I voted no for it the last time.
I voted no, and I still feel some sense of concern for elementary students. It's way easier to get a middle school kiddo on. They might be even sitting at home by themselves. I worry that there are kids like sitting at home or again with caregivers that aren't going to participate. So we have to openly know they aren't going to or can't, or even if they have working parents, they still might not because their parents are working and they're sitting with them. I do think that's a reality challenge. I mean, we didn't really talk about, I'd even be open to, which I know some of the surrounding districts are having dialogue about looking at different calendars of sorts because in-school learning is best versus e-learning plans. So you're not going in the end of June on and on because that's not good either. So, you know, I feel like that could be part of the dialogue. There could be multiple scenarios in relation to that too. So I'd be open to further dialogue, but maybe we haven't explored some further things on the topic that could be explored in relation to that.
And I think this year was an eye-opener. I voted yes for it originally. I work in a district. I've told you all where this works, and we end the school on the last day that they say we're going to end it on. I think for our students and our staff's sake, I agree with Mr. Zickert. Not a lot of learning is going on in those makeup days. I've been a part of them. So e-learning, I think, you know, in emergency situations is beneficial. And maybe there's just a couple tweaks that we need to make on what was brought forward. But I know originally, what was brought forward looks way different than, you know, what was originally said. And I think that was a lot of the union leaders working together with that. So, I say bring it back if Mr. Zickert's on board.
And then I think there's just clear expectations for what all of our personnel do, right? Like what if I'm in this non-certified support role, what's my expectation for the day? If I am a music teacher and not a classroom teacher at elementary, what am I doing, right? What am I doing as social worker? Is that a day I can get caught up on my 8 million paperwork things that are required, which would be, I think just if we could if people know what their role is, any of that would be helpful too in the event, in addition to having further dialogue, I guess.
All right, so we will plan to bring this back. We do have a little bit of time, and I know, for example, next month, we have a very full agenda, I think, forthcoming. When would you like me to bring it back? I want to allow time, obviously, for decision-making and modifications as need be, but I also think, given how busy I think our agendas are going to be in these coming months, if we wanted to wait until June or July, that would not be a horrible idea.
I would hate to see it wait till July, only because if there was some conversation and then feedback and then additional conversation, if we have a September deadline, if we could be done with it by June, I think that's, ideal. Obviously, we have the fail-safe of July, but if we could plan toward June with the idea that if any last-minute questions had to be answered, we'd still have July.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't really care the timeline more that we're continuing to have dialogue with whether it's our parent advisory for parent input or teacher union leads for teacher feedback in relation to any of those adjustments as well.
Okay. So I will plan on May so that we are prepared to vote. So bring it to committee in May, possibly to board in May, and possibly in June. So ed services in May. Yes. All right.
All right, any further discussion, or are we good to move on? Okay. IR discussion on an annual basis. Students across the state in 3rd through 8th grade participate in Illinois Assessment of Readiness, IAR. The IAR is computer-based assessments and assess those two content areas, reading and math. School districts receive raw data in the spring with more formalized reports later in the summer. Reports are available in the assessment platform, Pearson Access Next. As reports become available, school districts review the data with a variety of teams for a variety of purposes. Belvedere School District has the opportunity to analyze the results on a yearly basis in order to make improvements with student support, enrichment, curriculum development, instructional strategies, and overall school and district improvement. The IAR data is a part of the Illinois Report Card, which is an annual report released by the Illinois State Board of Education that shows how schools, districts, and the state are progressing on a wide range of goals. Portions of the Illinois Report Card determine the annual school summative designations, and each school and the district can be reviewed through the Illinois Report Card website. This report is annually released by the end of October. And we have added this based on, I know Mr. Zickert wanted to follow up in relation to the topic, so I don't know if you have any questions first before maybe Dr. Johnson jumps in, or first, or?
Can I cover just the assessing?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So there was a section where we were able just to kind of fill out how we assess our IAR data. So we thought it would be helpful just to kind of go through some of that. So like other school districts, when we receive that data, we're able to have a variety of groups taking a look at it. So starting really broad on all of our devices under what we call staff bookmarks that keeps all of our commonly used areas. We have a District 100 assessment toolkit. I linked that in there. It shows our assessment framework, the resources, data analysis, just a general timeline. It is available for all staff. Start of the year, we go through it. If there are any updates, it's highlighted at that point. So really broad. That goes through some of those pieces, which really can be any form of assessment because we have a wide variety within the district. Specific to IAR, then there is a doc in there called IAR Data Review and Next Steps, which refers to those specific teams that looks at the data when it becomes available. So if you're able to click in there, the document kind of shows who reviews the data for what purpose and next steps. And this is on an annual basis, so obviously used for a wide variety of purposes when we do receive that data through our portal. Underneath that is just some example reports that are referred to in the IAR Data Review and Next Steps doc. It's just helpful to have a visualization of that. The platform is called PAN, but within PAN, it's very easy for schools as well as district members to pull data for different reasons. So if you want to see data that is specific to students falling in certain categories within an IAR, you can do that. You can look by demographics. You can look by all the way down to specific students. There are reports that you can pull at the district and school level as well that shows the standards that were assessed and where do our students fall compared to the state on particular standards. It's really nice at the school level is they can see even by their school. So in some cases that might be something that just needs to kind of be kind of recharged at a grade level, whereas in other areas, our curriculum teams can take a look at that for the district level and say, oh wow, this is actually a whole district issue. Maybe this is a standard we should have been prioritizing more, and then how does that work into our long-term curricular plans? And then again, all the way down to student roster, where it's very easy for our teams that work with students, not only for intervention, but also for enrichment. So if you're hitting all of the areas and it's showing that you're achieving those, then how do we generate an acceleration path for you, for example? And then also linked in there is just the performance descriptors that come specifically from the state, which is actually good timing because our teams are utilizing this in these winter months, really looking at what does the state consider proficient in those specific areas in ELA and math. So it just shows there how we utilize some of those reports. But specifically with our strategic plan, we do have action planning committees. They were able to utilize a lot of this data to be able to create action plans for ELA and math, as those are two big components of our student achievement pillar 1. But even prior to that, you can see in the SY22, SY23 document of the strategies that we were working on in anticipation of a new strategic plan. That was specific to math. Again, kind of goes through just very briefly at each level, just some of the work that was happening in the 2 years leading up to these action plans. So again, that was really helpful for the teams themselves to kind of take a look at what we've been doing, what is the data showing with that, to help inform the action plans on there. Dr. Carson was a big part, as well as Dr. Valant on the action plans. Am I missing anything on those? No? Okay. Otherwise, this is just a really quick overview. I could talk for hours on what we do with all of this, but just wanted to give you a real quick snapshot of our work.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I appreciate that.
I talk too much.
I, for one, wouldn't hate it next year if you did spend a lot more time talking about it. Personally, I feel like it's one of the most important. I mean, it doesn't tell us everything we need to know. It isn't a complete metric or measure of everything that's going on, but strategic plan alignment with, student achievement. This is a measure of student achievement, and so I wouldn't mind having more than a 50-foot view, but maybe more of a ground level view of these things. And then maybe examples of how, okay, so we took this data, so we showed you the high level reports of here's how it can be used, here's an example of how it was used, here's an example of how we believe that we can be achieving differently for next year, the year after, and aligned with the support of the action plan that's been developed, all pointing back to the strategic plan. So I think this is an incredibly valuable thing, and if we take a deeper dive, it will not be time wasted.
And we do obviously service a lot of kiddos in our dual language program, so maybe in tandem with that, like Access would be helpful to see, right? Like those comparatives, because sometimes we might not see that they're meeting on their state, but we're really seeing that language development. So I think it's important, like, that we're looking at both in relation to those discussions, just to get a broader picture of our student success.
Yeah, and I did intentionally work one day at the Bilingual Academy in Rockford, the K-8 one.
Barbara.
And talked to their principal for quite some time afterwards, who's a Belvedere resident, by the way. He doesn't live in our district. He lives in North Boone. He lives in North Boone's on the other side of Candlewick. But he gave me some insights on what he thought achievement should be or shouldn't be for kids that are in those situations. I think that when I wanted to bring this up again, I gave a lot of data the last time, and some of it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure some people didn't think it was all that great, and some of them might have thought it was baloney and some wasn't, but numbers were numbers. And like I said before, in the one math one, when I looked at one out of 8 of our 11th graders was a grade level, to me that was concerning. Not that it's, it's concerning because I want to know what we're going to do about it, so to speak, or how we're going to improve that. I did, after I decided to do this, I did examine the stuff on the strategic plan update more than twice, quite a few times over the last few days that we got on Friday. And I did talk to a couple teachers about SIP Day and some of the things that went on SIP Day, which I think were mostly positive. But I'll just bring up an example. In elementary math, one of the things in there was guided walkthroughs, looking at what best practices are, what's working, what's not working, so on and so forth. I'm glad to see that. It's not that I'm not glad to see that, because I am really glad to see that. But I'm also wondering, we did that 3 years ago. So what have we done substantively between when we evaluated elementary math for a year and now? I mean, we're basically doing the same thing we did 3 years ago, which I'm not saying is not wrong. It's just that we have to be looking for something then. In 6th through 8, I saw we're doing common assessments, which I think is a good idea. I think having common formative assessments isn't a bad thing. We've done that in the past. But I'm wondering, what are we, when we develop these, what are we basing them on? I mean, are we looking at the IRA standards? When we look at some of these assessments, what are we doing with them? And the high school one, the building, trending classrooms, I didn't know what that was.
Building thinking.
I'm sorry?
Building thinking class.
Building thinking. I didn't know what that was, so I didn't want to comment on it because I don't have a clue what it was. It may be something great, I just didn't know what it was. I think when you look through K through 12, it talked about scope and sequence, which I think is wonderful. And I think looking at student standards, or the student standards we think are the most important for IRA and SAT, or based on IAR and SAT, is a good thing too, because we did look at that in our school scorecard about before I was ever on the board, and that was one of the things that we didn't do so well on the one time. Our goal was like 80%, we ended up in the 40s. So I think that's a good thing too. So I think the fact that we're actually looking at these tests and these components of what the SAT and IAR are doing in ways for improvement is a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, but I think we have to have a continuous plan moving forward and how we're going to rectify that, because again, if we really want to be a destination district, let's be a destination district. I don't think we're that far away from being one, but I think we have to improve some of this stuff if that's what we want to be.
Any further discussion?
I'll say one thing. To the point Matt made, when I look through this, I think it's great that we're having these discussions. I don't think we've really had these to this depth, and I think they should be even more in depth. To Lisa's point, because this is where the rubber meets the road, and when you look through some of the action plan, it talks about identifying those kids who are low or very low. I think it's very important that we get better at doing that a lot earlier in the process, because what my feedback that I get from teachers is they talk about the whole of the student. So say just pick a grade, they're a 5th grade teacher, and they talk about how this child went from 2nd grade and clearly didn't know the 2nd grade math material, and then we send them to 3rd grade and they don't know the 3rd grade math material. Then they go on to 4th grade, and clearly we had to kind of know that, right? We need to address those kids earlier, because when they get there and that teacher's trying to teach them more difficult material and they clearly don't have the base before that, I mean, that's why we're, in my opinion, one of the reasons we're not doing as well as we could. And it's not the teachers. I think we have to find ways to address that earlier so that doesn't happen. I don't think we've done that great in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I had 3rd grade teachers tell me a year ago that the kids trying to do 3rd grade math wasn't possible anymore because the skill level wasn't, they weren't able to get there from where they were in 2nd grade. And I don't know if it's an Envision math problem. I don't know. But I think whatever it is, we need to figure out what that is and find ways to give them more support early on, like Mr. Bucher said, if we have to. I work a lot with high school kids, obviously. It's a lot harder to change. Once they get to 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, the substantive change you can make is really, really hard. I mean, it's really, really hard. 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, not as difficult. I mean, I think you can get more bang for your buck there, and getting those kids on the right path, getting them interested in school, getting them wanting to learn and things like that. And I think, if nothing else, we need to do whatever we can to make that happen.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of kids that are coming to us that are not regulated, and we're spending a lot of our day chasing children that are unregulated, that are biting, that are physically aggressive to staff. And so I think we need, as we've talked about before, those supports. So we have a place in the building that's an interventionist designed to support an alternative space that's not the classroom, because we need to get them regulated so they can learn. And that's when we see those gaps start to come into play. And I think that definitely is a different challenge that we're continuing to face more and more readily, that needs support in addition to the academics that Mr. Bucher was talking about. We need both.
I 100%. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, so once I saw this appear on the agenda again, I kind of dug into the numbers too a little bit, because I was, we had the little chart showing our comparison schools and how we compare to the state average, and I was trying to figure out, and obviously there's no one contributing factor to, there are a million factors that affect test scores, but something I found very interesting is when you look at our benchmark districts, which are Aurora West, Champaign, Moline Cole, DeKalb, Harum, and Woodstock. If you go on the state scorecard, there's a metric, it's kindergarten readiness. And of those schools, we have the lowest kindergarten readiness rate. The next highest is Champaign, and they are 190% higher than we are in kindergarten readiness. I mean, the gulf is enormous. Our kindergarten readiness last year was 10%, and that's defined as readiness in 3 development areas: social emotional development, language and literacy, and math. So in comparison, let's see, the state kindergarten readiness is 30%, Woodstock's 28%, DeKalb's 31%, Rockford's 25%, Barrington's 65%. I mean, that's just huge. And on the one hand, that's kind of depressing, but on the other hand, I feel like we as a board have lately been prioritizing early childhood education, and we voted to expand our program. Coming up, the facilities committee is going to make some recommendations regarding further expansion of our early childhood education program. Facilities-wise, I think this is a huge opportunity to have a real effect on academic achievement. It's kind of low-hanging fruit. It's really a stunning correlation between the performance in these districts and their kindergarten readiness.
Yeah.
And so I really hope, and I know I'm not telling our administrators anything they don't know, because they sit and look at this data all day long, but for me, that was really, really an eye-opener.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we are prioritizing that, and I know that will take some time to funnel up through the system, and there are other things that we need to do to serve our kids who are already in kindergarten and grades 12, but I think this can make a real difference for us going forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It'll make a big difference, and I 100% agree with you that that's where we need to start. My big question always was, why didn't we do it before then? I mean, you saw the data. The data's probably not much different than it was a couple years ago.
It's different.
No.
We've gone down in kindergarten readiness.
How much?
Like it was 20% a couple years ago, and now it's 10%.
So we've gone down.
Accurate.
We've gone
Yep.
down half.
Yep.
But most of those kids we have now that aren't performing well have gone through the system. I mean, the guys, we've had, whether it be 11th graders, whether it be 7th graders, whether it be 3rd graders, they're not just a year or two into the system. They've been in the system quite a while. So somewhere along the line, they must have shown a deficit. Like, for example, you look back at the data in 2000, I'll get it right. In 2013 and 14, the reading scores took a huge drop. They went from 3.7 compared to the state average to under 16% below the state average back 10 years ago. Math scores went down around the same time. They took a big drop. So it's not like this just happened yesterday or the day before. It's happened for a while. I mean, we've been this way for a while now. And I'm not saying what you're advocating isn't correct. It is. I 100% agree with you. I just wish we would have identified this and been doing this all along. Like I said, the stuff we're doing and looking at the standards now and looking at how we can align our curriculum to those standards to give us an opportunity to do better, I think it's great. I'm glad we're doing that. I really, really am. I think that's a move in the right direction. I just hope we keep doing it.
Yeah, and I think we've been doing that for a long time. We've been doing that for years. And I also think that the other things to look at are demographic changes in the district over time as well. That's been a huge, there have been some huge changes in that regard too. So like I said, it's not just any one thing. I don't think we're suddenly realizing or suddenly trying to address drops in test scores. I think we need to keep working on it, and I think it's kind of got to be a multi-layer plan of attack.
So I would say two things. I agree with a lot of what's being said here, and I really do think it will be prudent for us to have lots more discussions like this about academic achievement and how we're predicting it and how we're planning for it and how we're achieving different results. But at some point in time, I think we have to just make a decision to say we can either focus on what was or what will be, right? So yes, we've not been in the best place we'd like to be, and we can plan for going forward, right? We can be informed by what was happening and hopefully, but at some point in time, we do have to draw a line and say, you know, we can either focus on what was or what will be. We will not be able to divide and do both. Now, if focusing on what was by certain members and teams and analytical data review gives us a better idea as to what will be or how we get to what we want for things to be, that's great. But I also operate regularly on a philosophy that bad news is bad. Late bad news is terrible. So the sooner we know that there's issues, challenges, concerns, that we get feedback from teachers who are saying, we're seeing the dysregulation increasing and we're addressing that, the sooner we are dealing with the bad news, the less terrible and the less prolonged it will be. And I understand there's only certain things about the bad news and dealing with the bad news that falls within the board's purview. Ultimately, the end is student achievement. That's the end. And being in a place to know about the factors to the degree that is appropriate and speak into them to the degree that is appropriate needs to be done more timely or as timely as it possibly can be. And this is a good jumping off place. If bringing this conversation forward allowed Ms. Mayville to take a deep dive into illuminating an area that no one had well articulated about a particular pinpoint of data that says, whoa, here, let's really take a look at that, and it can inform additional discussions and information that is now available from Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Carson's seats, and they are taking a deeper dive on data and sharing it more deeply with us, and people like Mr. Zickert are bringing it back to the board to say, hey, but maybe we didn't give it enough discussion. I think all of those are a win, ultimately for students, and so I think that's a good thing. It proves that this discussion tonight was incredibly valuable, and I appreciate everybody who did work to bring additional information and data forward, because I think all of it was illuminating.
Yeah, I think I'm really happy that of the last two meetings. I really honestly am, is that since the last time Cheryl Gievsky presented to the board on the state report cards in October of who knows when, and I've been there, not every board meeting, but I've been almost every one. This has been the most prolonged discussion the last two times we've had on this stuff in the last many, many years, which I think is a wonderful thing. Not saying we have to do it all the time, or should we do it all the time. I just think it's good to have discussions like this at least once or twice a year. That's it. It doesn't have to be every month.
I agree with Lisa that we need to look at what our data says and move forward, and our context has changed. So looking back 5, 10, 15 years is not always super insightful because who we serve now is different. Likewise, yes, there are a ton of improvement areas, but I feel really proud that we have a lot of schools that aren't in status, and that is not the common picture compared to a lot of our local school districts. And so, yes, there are areas that Dr. Johnson defined that we're making a cognizant effort to work on. They'll have to come up with a multi-year plan that they will be monitoring. It won't be the schools that are in target will have to do that. We are not in a lower status where we have to intimately be involved, which is a positive. And like I said, there's a lot of schools that are not in status and are in commendable or above. So like those are things too we need to be equally messaging, that are positive, that we need to keep those efforts going.
And just as a quick advertisement, I would encourage all of you to sign up for the webinar on the Illinois State Report Card. It's the 7th, the 14th, and the 20-something
28th.
that Pam sent us. I mean, that'll give you an idea what the school report card's all about. It'll tell you how they come up with those commendable or not commendable. It's not exactly what I think some of you think it is. So I think it'd be very valuable information for everybody to do that if you possibly could.
And then I'll review it annually. That comes out in October, so Ed Services gets it in November.
And also, Mrs. Brenner, kudos to you, because if it's true, we haven't talked about it in the last few years. There's been a lot of different presidents, vice presidents in the last few years that could have brought it forward. So thank you for bringing it forward.
I agree.
All right, any other dialogue before we continue? Okay, upcoming contract renewals and reports, again, those are attached and provided for your reference. At this time, I would now like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Sharp for administrative reports.
All right, I'm going to go very quickly through superintendent comments. I know it's late.
It's killing me. I'm just like,
I promise to be quick, but
no, I get it. It's important.
I cannot fail to recognize Brock Botcher, who was named the first ever Rockford Register Student of the Week. He is going on to do fantastic things in his life. Congratulations to the North JV cheerleading, Nick 10 conference champs. Applaud them too. And to South Middle School's first place math counts team that will be competing at state in March.
All right.
World Read Aloud Day was a great success again this year. If you didn't look at our Facebook post, there's all sorts of fabulous pictures there of all of our special readers that came in. And a thank you to our school counselors. February 5th through the 9th was School Counseling Week. Oh, and thank you. And this is our 100th day of school. I know, how adorable. And we had lots of adorable dressing up for that 100th day of school. Strategic plan updates. I'm going to take just a couple minutes on this again. I know the hour is late, but I do want to share with you this monthly presentation. I'm going to start by clicking into the district scorecard, if you would please, Janine. This district scorecard snapshot is being shared at all of our committee meetings, and it's going to give you an overview of the 5 goals, where we are in terms of those goals. So if you scroll down a little bit there, you can see where we are in terms of our KPI status, where we are in terms of the milestones, and each of those goal areas is being tracked. We are meeting about it weekly in cabinet, and then again monthly at each of our committee meetings. And in addition to that, we have a variety of action planning teams working towards those. And you can see all of the milestones that are currently in progress, and then also the KPI status by strategy. And then you can also see our monitoring heat map, which is giving us an idea of where each of those goal areas are in terms of how on track they feel they are to success. This gives us an idea of where we need to dig in and where we think we're where we need to be. We are rotating through each of those goal areas with our cabinet team doing regular stock takes. So the cabinet team is doing a deep dive into each of those goal areas, providing feedback to those teams to again continue to evaluate that progress. And we will be doing that with all of our building principals coming up in June as we'll do a deep dive into their data and the work that they're doing at their sites. I think the process has been, it's taken us a while to sort of get our a feet under us, I think, as we've been building the process to operationalize this plan. But I think our cadence has been really strong. We've got a really good process moving forward, and I'm excited to really be able to be sharing that on a monthly basis. There's good work being done, as has already been shared tonight, in terms of so much of our action planning. So I think it's exciting, and I'm excited about the work. You can see, if you go back into the PowerPoint slides there for us, thank you, Janine. There are goal updates for each one of our goals, what it is we're working on in those areas. I'm just going to quickly highlight a few. Special ed review of programs. We had originally planned to bring that back in March. We are bringing it back in April because it was delayed with the snow days during the visitation time, but you will be getting a full evaluation in April of that programming. EL dual language evaluation is ongoing, and you're going to be getting a full evaluation of that and the recommendations that are forthcoming, as Mr. Herrera alluded to earlier. Early childhood expansion, up to 378 students enrolled, over 100 more students than we were serving last year. This time I think it's 114 more students that are in our programming, and exactly what Mr. Bill is talking about, getting our students in earlier, providing them structure and support. And then you see our district level math and ELA planning teams. And you saw that work already. Goal 2, you've seen this work ongoing, had a fantastic day on Friday. High school schedule team will be coming forward, and effective school solutions. As Mr. Zickert alluded to, we've been working really hard to get that piece in place. Still in some of the hiring there, but hoping to have that in place coming up in these next couple of weeks. Goal 3 is our action planning team for family and community partnerships. The board can expect to see a plan coming forward there in May. Goal 4, as we already discussed, seeing real increases in terms of our sub-fill rates, 7% ahead of where we were last school year, 14% of where we were the year before. That is Dr. Adey and his team doing fantastic work there. And Goal 5, you are going to hear from Goal 5 next month as we anticipate bringing forward recommendations from the facilities and long-range planning team regarding the master plan. That is just a very big, broad overview, tons of work that is going on, and always happy to talk to you in additional detail about any of those specific goal areas, as we did tonight, really digging into goal area number 1.
I just have one really quick thing
Yeah,
on the
go ahead.
EIS, is that whatever we can do to light a fire under them.
Under who?
EIS.
Oh, yeah,
is-
yes, ESS.
I mean, the people,
ESS,
the people at Central thought they got a Christmas present, and it's gonna be March 1st, and they haven't seen it yet, and they're really hurting. I mean,
Yep.
I feel bad for the principal, I mean, everybody, whatever we can do to speed that up would be helpful.
We agree. Literally, Dr. Carson and I are on communication every single day with them. They are feeling the pressure from us because we know that we've got to get this done.
But realistically, we're setting expectation with the school that it's looking, I mean, because I'm asking, not we are we, obviously, they're aware, no one's been hired, no one's been onboarded yet, like the process is not done. Is there some feedback to them about, okay, let's figure out some additional interim strategies to deal with the solutions that we hope this will eventually bring, and set a more realistic timeline? Is it looking more like really late March, early April before they're fully operational?
What was the expectation they put forth when we started? Because remember, I asked the question, I said,
Yes.
where are the people, when is this gonna happen? And the response was, no, they're on top of that, ready to go. And here we are, months later, and nothing's happened.
Well,
Somebody turned
yes.
down the job.
Yes. I mean, they have been working hard to fill these positions. They have gone through multiple interview processes. Their top runner, we were hoping was going to be in place already this week, wound up declining the job. They've got 2 now additional candidates that they are working with.
And pretty early in the process, the interview process. Midway
One's
through?
pretty close to the end, and the second is also really pretty close to the end. So we're hoping to hear in the next few days that this has been solidified, Dr. Carson, you're closer to it than I am. Am
Well, I think that's really it, right? Is that we're just waiting for them to finish the hiring process, and the principal, she's on all these same correspondence. She's in the loop in terms of where steps.
And I'm fine with all that. I mean, I know that there's, I mean, we
Yeah, our hands are tied.
we can't do any more than we can do. But I'm also looking, as we look at interim solutions, that, I mean, I heard the referrals are backlogged a long time. And restorative discipline is all good if it happens in a timely fashion, but if it happens 3 weeks after the fact, that's really not ideal. So, I mean, I'm even open to bringing in people if we have to help them out, to give them, I mean, whatever support we need to give them, I think is important. So,
I mean, unfortunately, we aren't able, like, the reality is that the board empowered the district to pay the money, and, you know, you'd love to give somebody a check. But there's no, so finding interim solutions, I think, you know, if there are any, if we have enough time to do it,
I appreciate that feedback, and
this is supposed to be it.
we will
be it.
keep being in communication and figuring out how we can support. I mean, I think that's definitely everybody's goal here, is to give them the support they need in as timely a fashion as we possibly can. And it is definitely not due to lack of our communication of urgency.
Everybody's pushing again, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yes, we are pushing very hard, so.
Well, this was the same problem we had I mean, again, not problem, but this is a common problem now. The hiring process is difficult in marketplace, in education, in all industries. We were in the same place when we said yes to the additional, you know, support through, for the, I won't say counselor, because I'm not sure that that's the right word, but, you know, and they just never found anybody.
No.
I mean, it just went unfilled, and so that's what I'm concerned about here is, you know, heaven forbid we get to near the finish line with another person. They could turn it down. I mean, we don't know, we hope they don't, but they didn't think the last person was gonna turn it down, I'm sure. So finding alternatives that you maybe bring back to say, okay, just in case, or in an immediate need to address, what are the building levels asking for, and what, you know, what if anything at the board level is necessary to make that happen, I think feels like an important thing, because we really said this was a huge problem and a big priority, and then to everybody just be kind of stuck in idle is a problem.
I think we agree. I appreciate the feedback, and I know that Mrs. Getty and Central appreciates the work to get this in place as well. Behavior response guide, Dr. Carson.
We can talk about that next time, maybe, if that's okay with everybody else, since it's getting late.
Well, yeah, sure. If anyone has any feedback, the draft is in there. It's very skeletal. So if, and that's intentional, because before we put a lot of time and energy into putting all the meat on the bones, wanted to provide the opportunity for some feedback. So please, if you have any to share, you can see all 4 of the district administrators working on that. We'd all welcome an email or a call from you with your feedback. So thank you.
Dr. Carson did spend a bit of time preparing this, so.
I'm sorry, my only question was, and I was the one who asked about it. Will you give us clarification once you guys get further, which I know you're not there yet, just in relation to obviously like our board involvement, right? Like now as we're looking at potentially like a hearing officer for expulsions, right? Like a lot of this looks awesome and is restorative, which I like. Can you, once you guys get far enough, can we see it again as far as like when it's more restrictive measures, right? Like when OSS comes into play, when we're at a 10-day count, what does that look like? You know what I mean? Which obviously you guys are just starting, so that was my only question.
Mrs. Brennan?
And last thing on there is just the 6-day enrollment count. You can see our numbers are down overall, but up in EC. So that's really what those numbers are telling us, and pretty much what we anticipated seeing. So that's it for admin reports, unless anybody has any questions. I tried to do it as fast as I could.
Any other questions for Dr. Shug? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second. Okay, Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Mayville seconded the motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 9:04.
Before everybody leaves, I
yes.
just need the board to stay for a quick minute because I don't have a quorum
Just to know about
for an upcoming
Sorry,
special
thank you
board
that I
meeting.
took over your space with that. Thank you.
What day?
Thursday or
Can you come
Monday?
Thursday?